care of my comp time is through COVID, right?
Yeah, possibly. It's a good.
Because I mean, you know.
But the comp time isn't paid.
Oh, I see.
I mean, it's not like I don't know how it's accounted for, but you might want to put that on there,
Okay.
if it's possible. Thing is, it's earned in one time and then paid in another, so it's
Oh, okay.
different. It's kind of hard to do the Zoom and
Here comes a suspect.
David Wickland. I have eyes in the back of my head. How do I get
Can I up here?
this to stop
Yeah, I guess I am.
recording? Yeah, I think.
Good evening.
Hi, how are you doing this evening?
All right, so we're recording on Zoom and actually the audio here. So. Roland, we have all the members now.
Okay, great. I have 6:59, so as soon as my phone, it's 7 o'clock. It is 7 o'clock, Tuesday, July 14th, 2020. I'm going to read the statement on top of the agenda for anyone listening electronically. In accordance with the Governor's Executive Orders 20-09 and 20-18, this meeting is open to the public and can be accessed electronically. Public comment for the public hearings may be submitted via email to communitydevelopment@munster.org or by mail to attention Planning Director 10005 Ridge Road, Munster, Indiana 46321. All correspondence related to received prior to the meeting will be read and entered into the record. This meeting is called to order, and we will stand for the Pledge of Allegiance now. Would someone in the room with the flag like to start us off?
Pledge allegiance
To the flag
of
of the United States,
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice
for all. Next item on the agenda is the roll call. Tom, would you please call roll?
Certainly. Sharon Mayer,
Present.
Stuart Friedman,
Present.
Dan Buxa,
Here.
Jonathan Peterson,
Present.
and Chairman Raffin.
Present. We have a quorum. Next item is the approval of minutes from June 9th, 2020. Has the board had a chance to review this? And if so, what's the pleasure?
Mr. Chairman, I have reviewed the minutes and I find them to be accurate, so I would move for them to be accepted.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Mr. Chairman, I second the motion, and I would like to speak to it real quickly.
Yes.
On page 5, there's recorded and made this statement, and then with your indulgence, I would like to discuss that during other business of the agenda.
Okay, you would like to, you're coming a little bit muffled on my computer. You like to talk about that in other business at the end?
Yes, please.
Okay, we will put that in there as other business. We have a motion as second. Is there any other further discussion? Being none, Tom, would you please call roll?
Sharon Mayer,
Yes.
Stuart Friedman,
Yes.
Dan Buxa,
Yes.
Jonathan Peterson,
Yes.
Chairman Rappin?
Yes. Motion passes. There are no preliminary hearings tonight, so we'll move on to the public hearings. The first item on the agenda under public hearings is BZA docket number 20-007, Jewel Osco requesting variances from table 26-6.701.b of the Munster zoning ordinance to permit additional sign on the front elevation of the building at 716 Ridge Road. Tom, would you please give a brief presentation on this petition?
Yes. This is a petition coming to the board from Jewel Osco, represented by Doyle Signs. They are proposing a new sign on their building at 716 Ridge Road. There's a rendering of the sign provided in the staff report, which I'm going to pull up on the screen right now. And the sign as presented does not conform with the Munster zoning code. So therefore they are requesting 3 variances. The variances are as follows. To add 2 additional signs on their facade. So our standard in the code is 1 sign per building facade, and they already have 2, so they're adding a 3rd. The second variance is from the size standard, or the height standard rather. Our code caps a wall sign at 3 feet, and they're requesting a 5-foot sign. And then the 3rd variance is from the material standards. The code states that any background panel shall be made of metal or painted or stained wood, and they're proposing a vinyl sign or vinyl graphic on a white flex sign cabinet. So I'll just say that the preliminary hearing was held last month on June 9th. The conversation that took place at that meeting was that there may be some confusion in the location of the sign, since that was represented to not be the location where the actual drive up and go activities would take place. So the board members expressed some concern that vehicles would be, parking in that area and blocking the fire lane in front of the store, which has happened in the past under different circumstances, and it's been kind of an ongoing issue at that store. So the suggestion was made actually to consider installing some marker signs within the parking lot as an alternative. I'll also note just one section of our variance standards in our code states that the Board of Zoning Appeals, when they're considering variances, should grant the minimum variance that will relieve such practical difficulties or unnecessary hardships as applicable. So what that means is if there is a particular difficulty that an applicant is trying to overcome, they should be given a variance for that difficulty, and that difficulty only, not additional variances that really are unrelated to the hardship. So I'll just state that the plans that were submitted with respect to this application have not changed since the June meeting.
Thank you, Tom. Does anyone have any questions for Tom regarding this before I bring it to the petitioner? Tom, is there someone to speak on behalf of Jewel or Doyle Signs?
Yes, there is somebody here present.
Okay. Would they like to come up to the microphone, state their name, who they are, and who they're with?
Certainly.
Camera's up there.
Thank you. I was a little confused on that. Good evening, everyone. My name is John Streets. I'm here with Doyle Signs, here on behalf of Jewel Osco. At the core of this request, forgive me because I'm going to be a little repetitive from last month's meeting. It's to identify a service that's very much driven by the pandemic that will allow people to place their orders via an app on their phone and then drive into a parking space, call into the store to let them know that they're there, and someone will run it out to their car and load up their vehicle. So it's like a contactless service. In the days of this pandemic, the service is very, very important, both from a confidence level of consumers and just to keep business going for Jewel Osco. This sign is proposed to illuminate. It is well sized on the storefront. And I believe if allowed, this will allow them to identify the service to the public in a safe and effective manner. That said, at the last meeting, there were a variety of comments that addressed the fire lane. I've been told, that this, with regard to the drive up and go service, it's not an issue with people parking there because they have wayfinding signs in the site, and the app walks everyone through very clearly where they should be parking, and that should not be an issue. For instance, Jewel has had the pharmacy sign on the building for years, and no one has parked under the pharmacy sign. Drive up and go signs have been installed at over 35 locations to date and have not been experiencing any shoppers driving under the sign to pick up their orders. One other thing I wanted to note is that, there's 3 items to this variance, one of which is we are currently proposing something taller than 3 feet. If it would help to get approval for this request, I can revise the entire display and reduce the logo to 3 feet. And that way we're not violating that portion of code. It's a 3-foot high sign max. Basically, the logo would shrink down, the spacing would tighten up just a little bit between drive up and go. And that would allow them to accommodate that portion of code. But as mentioned, the hardship here is with regard to what code allows for this site and the pandemic. Much like pharmacy is a service that they provide, the drive up and go is a service that they provide, and it's very important for them and for their consumers, their customers. That said, I do have a drawing. I know no one here, no one on Zoom can see it, but I can pass it out to staff that just basically shows the 3-foot high display that is no longer 5-foot high. This is something I didn't have clearance to present prior to today. I do sincerely apologize to staff and everyone on this board that I was not able to provide this in advance to this meeting. But is it all right if I pass that out now?
Absolutely.
We have one board member here who might want to take a look at it. Of course.
So basically it's the same sign, but 3 foot tall.
That is correct.
So it's 3 foot tall instead of 5 feet tall.
Right. Still 3 by 12, basically 3 by 11.9.
Right.
I have a question for the speaker.
Yes, Mr. Peterson.
We addressed this last time. The pick up and go sign is on, I'm orienting myself. The face of the building faces north and the sign is on the east side of the building. But it's my understanding that the pickup will be on the west side of the building, in essence, under the pharmacy sign. Speaker, is that correct?
The parking is on that side of the property, but it's even beyond the pharmacy sign. It's all the way in the last western parking spaces. I visited the site today just to confirm. They have small signs that identify each of those parking spaces with a number on it, and it has the logo painted on the ground, I believe, that'll direct people. There's also some small wayfinding signs at the major ingress and egress points that direct people to that area.
Okay, I have a follow-up to that question. The pharmacy in that building is located, candidly, as I recall, on the east side of the building. My wife and I shop at that Jewel location, and the pharmacy, when you go in, is all the way in the back, and it's my understanding it would be on the east side. So the board made some comments to you at the last meeting, suggesting that you locate the signs to reflect where the usage will be. And I see that those comments were completely ignored. I find that a little disturbing, particularly in the type of situation that we're in today, where you're offering this service. We're trying to make life easier for the residents in our community. And moving signs around to accommodate that, I think is a reasonable request. And I'm a little piqued by the fact that you ignored those comments completely. And you're revisiting this and trying to point out how the pharmacy sign's been on the west side of the building for years. Well, yeah, it's been there for years, but maybe it's been mispositioned. So I'm throwing that out for the board to consider as we continue to evaluate this petition.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Does anyone else have any questions for the petitioner?
Well, I also want to point out there were no comments about in the report that I've seen about the fire lane. We discussed that the last time. I agree with Mr. Peterson. It's a completely confusing situation that the pharmacy sign is on the west side and this proposed sign would be on the east side. And I would like to ask the petitioner, what is Juul's position about enforcing that fire lane situation? Because now that we have the opportunity to have Juul in front of us, because I'm very curious what their response is before we would even grant a variance.
With regard to the
Mr.
fire
Freeman,
lane,
I'd like to make a point of clarification. We have representative from the sign company representing Juul, and I think they only probably speak on the sign. Is that correct?
that is correct. As the sign representative here with Doyle Signs, on behalf of Juul, I can really only comment about the sign. I do know it would be Juul's intention to follow codes with regard to any signage or anything needed with regard to fire lane directionals or fire lane warning.
Well, the hard part about Juul is they aren't local in Munster. They don't follow our codes. They clutter that front of that store continually with mulch and whatever, water bottles, whatever they could put out there. So when you say about Juul following codes, I don't think Juul really cares so much about following local codes in Munster, Indiana, if they could just make $1.
Are these issues that have come up in the past, things that Munster has issued citations to Juul over?
They have been put on notice before several times regarding the stuff outside their store.
Okay, well, I do apologize. I can't comment on that specifically, but you know, as far as the sign location goes, forgive me for not addressing that in my initial description of this request. If moving that sign, the one we're proposing reading logo and drive up and go to the other side of the building, that is something I can certainly discuss with Juul and see if they'd be okay with that. But at this point, that was not approved to relocate it to the other side.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I have another question.
Yes, Mr. Freeman.
So this terminology, drive up and go, is a trademark or something that's been adopted by Juul concerning this idea of delivering groceries out to the parking lot of the customer?
Yes, this is branding for that program.
Okay. So then I would state for the benefit of the BZA that I think the terminology drive up and go is very, very confusing to the public. It gives the impression that you drive up to the door to get your groceries. I don't see how the sign is going to help resolve that situation. So I would be against granting the variance under these circumstances. If the sign said park and deliver, you know, something logical, and if it was on the west side of the building, then it would make sense. But I don't see how this adds anything to the situation or improves the situation at all.
Mr.
Thank you,
Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Peterson. Remember, this is a public hearing as well.
I understand. I have a question for Mr. Vanderwood. Mr. Vanderwood, would you please advise the board of the staff recommendation for this petition?
Yeah, the staff recommendation is to deny the petition. And it's based on a couple things. One, they have not addressed the question of the fire lane and the board's questions regarding the location of the signage. And two, they have not given regard to the fact that the variance should be the minimum, what did I say? The minimum variance that will relieve the practical difficulty. Further, I don't think they've stated a true difficulty that they have with complying with the code.
Okay, so you're suggesting that the board deny the petition. It's my understanding if we deny the petition, Jewel will be barred from resubmitting this petition for a year. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right.
Thank you, Mr.
Mr. Raffin, I've got a follow-up question for the.
Yes, Mr. Pearson.
Representative for Jewel, I understand you're with the sign company. We don't have a Jewel representative here tonight. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. So if the board denies the petition, this is off the table for a year. You've indicated that you'd be willing to go back to Jewel and talk with them. My suggestion is I'm inclined, if this is the only thing that Jewel is going to bring before us, I'm inclined to follow in the footsteps of Mr. Friedman and vote to deny this petition. But I would also be willing to consider continuing this petition for a period of time to allow you to go back to Jewel and present the concerns that we have now presented to you in 2 meetings and see if you can get Jewel to address these concerns. That would give you an opportunity to come back and present a petition that could potentially be approved as opposed to one that's going to be denied on its face. What's your thoughts about that?
Number one, thank you for expressing those items and showing that there is some flexibility here. This is something, you know, now that I'm here and I have everyone in front of me, the Zoom calls sometimes can be very different when I was just calling into it the last time, not having video to connect with at all. That said, if this is something that can be tabled, I can try to negotiate with Jewel and express these concerns again. Then I can come back if there's a revision and have, you know, at the next meeting.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Is there any other, Mr. Buxa?
Roland, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I have a quick comment to make on this. You're actually going to need to get a representative to come here from Jewel because this gentleman is just in charge of the sign. And if he comes back with the same type of answers and you have questions directly to Jewel Osco, he's not going to be the person you're going to need to have comments to. So somehow we need to get someone from Jewel Osco to actually answer some of your questions because this gentleman is only trying to put up a sign right now. And I think this is going to continue going round and round in circles. And I agree that, you know, trying to get to the bottom of this and trying to get your questions answered is the right direction with, you know, instead of just denying them and allowing them not to come back for a year. But I think we need to try and get a Jewel Osco representative here to answer your questions. That's my only comments.
Thank you, Dr. Kaltritis. Any other
Mr. Chairman.
before I open?
Mr. Chairman, may I?
Yes, Ms. Mayor.
And I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name, representative of Doyle Sign. So just to make sure that we're all on the same page here, because I'm not quite sure what the question is for Jewel. He needs to relay back to them about the fire lane. So can somebody explain what it is the concern there?
Well, I think it's the amount of cars that stop there in the fire lane to be able to walk in the store. It's a continuous stop of traffic flow with people parking in front of their store and blocking the fire lane, coming into their store, not pulling the parking lot spots and blocking access right there. And you see a lot of cars park around the corner by where the pharmacy sign is. They park around the corner and wait there to pick people up during inclement weather.
Okay. So basically what you're wanting the Jewel rep to address is how they're going to fix this issue with cars parking in the fire lane.
That, and as well as the amount of clutter that they put out their store that literally blocks the public sidewalk walking in and around that building from the outside. That people have to walk in the fire lane to get around the stuff they put in front of that store.
Okay. And then as far as the sign goes, the concern there is that having the drive and go, or whatever it's called, sign on the east side of the building rather than the west side of the building is confusing because the pickup is actually on the west side, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So Mr. Doyle, Rep, you got all that?
Yes, thank you.
But here, who was just speaking? I couldn't see.
Mr. Buxa,
Yes, Mr. Buxa.
was it your intent to hold the public hearing?
Yes, we still have to hold a public hearing tonight.
Okay.
I
and would
can't
like to
hear
do
Dan.
something with that then.
It's hard for me to hear Daniel.
So is there any other questions for the petitioner? If there are none, I will open it up to a public hearing. Tom, is anyone here to speak on behalf of this petition from the public?
I see no one. Oh, there is one. Yes. We
Okay.
have somebody here in the room. Please, you can come up to the podium.
Please state your name and address for public record.
Name and address.
Yeah, and please sign this side of the sheet.
My name is Virginia Mahalik. I live at 8511 Jefferson in Munster. I'm a home owner right behind Jewel. Okay, and yes, you're correct about the fire lane. No one patrols it right now, either the firemen or the policemen. They don't seem to patrol that. There was a fire chief, I had the first name of Bob years ago. And if he drove through and saw cars parked there, he would get them out of it. And in order to walk to the store from behind Jewel, you either walk with the cars that go into the bank lane or driving through, but you have to walk eventually up that slope where they have delivery trucks sometimes, and you have to walk across that fire lane in order to enter the building. And I don't trust Jewel with their signs. I mean, please be very careful what kind of signs you allow them to put up. My say.
Thank you very much.
Roland,
Yes, Mr. Buxa.
Dave Wickland, I just want the record to reflect that the Jewel has properly notified the public hearing this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Wickland. Tom, is there anyone else to speak from the public?
I see no one in the room and I see no one on the Zoom.
That being said, I will close the public hearing and bring it back to the board. I just want to state my opinion on this. After going to all these places nowadays that have spots in their parking lot where I can order off on an app, whether it's Chick-fil-A or a steakhouse or anything else, it's not a sign in the building that directs me where to go. This is merely advertising for the store, marketing the program they have. I look for the pylon signs in the parking lot, whether it's numbered 1 through 6. It tells me on the app where I should go, and I pull in that thing, and I tell them I'm here, and they bring whatever order I have out. I don't think it's a necessity. I think we have a strict sign code that we developed to keep the town clean and neat of signs on buildings, and I think we should stick to the adherence of the code that took us years to develop. That's my opinion. So therefore, I recommend deny the petition.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
this is Mr. Buxa.
Yes, Mr. Buxton.
I would be supportive of Mr. Peterson's idea for continuance, and if that were the case, I would like to bring up what I did previously, that the petitioner consider bringing the pylon sign on Calumet Avenue, which is currently, I believe, legal non-conforming to be conforming. Thank you.
Tom, on
Mr.
that
Chairman?
sign, if they redid a sign, would there be enough room on there to put their logo for their drive up and go on that sign on Calumet Avenue?
Yeah, I mean, they're permitted a 18 square foot monument sign on any frontage, so yeah, they would be able, I mean, it would be smaller than the sign that's there now.
Well, I think that's a heck of an option for Jewel to consider regarding changing that monument sign on Calumet Avenue and be able to have Jewel Osco and the drive up and go on that sign.
Mr.
It'll be a lot
Chairman?
more attractive than on the building. And you would know not to drive up to that sign and park your car there. Yes, Mr. Peterson.
Mr. Chairman, I'm inclined to give, Jules an important corporate citizen in the town of Munster. I'm inclined to give them one more opportunity to come back to us with a presentation that includes Jewel representatives, and that would be responsive to the concerns that the board has expressed. So I'm going to make a motion to table this hearing for one more month or 2 months at the pleasure of the speaker, to allow Jewel to revisit this petition and bring back something to us that I think the board could support.
We have a motion on the floor to table.
Mr. Chairman, I second the motion.
Mr. Buxton seconds the motion. Is there any discussion on this motion? I would like to ask the petitioner, is that something Jewel would consider? Redoing a monument sign on Calumet Avenue to make it meet our local codes?
I can discuss it with Jewel and see their stance on it.
Well, I think it's a fair, fair in the spirit of negotiation to bring that sign up to code, and you can add your signage on that before a variance is given to be put on the building. So we have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? Tom?
Mr. Raffin,
Yes,
how
Mr. Peterson.
How far out does this, if the speaker's inclined to go with this, how far out would he like us to reset this?
Would you like to be on the calendar for next month or the month after? Would you like to talk to staff? We can, I guess that would be a decision between staff and the petitioner and when they can get on the agenda, right?
From a staff perspective, it makes no difference. We could put it on August if they have their materials ready.
That
We'll put,
Okay.
I attach no deadline to revisit this motion.
So we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Tom, would you please call roll?
Sharon Mayer,
Yes.
Stuart Friedman,
Yes,
Daniel Buxa,
Yes.
Jonathan Peterson,
Yes,
Roland Raffin.
Yes. Thank you. Please work with staff on coming up with a redesign that can meet our local codes.
Will do, thank you.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is BZA docket number 20-008 NP Building Partners LLC requesting the following variances in a medical office building at 9445 Calumet Avenue from section 26640501H V112 to waive the requirement to plant trees within the required parking lot buffer from section 266405S2 to waive the requirement to plant thoroughfare trees along Columbia Avenue. Tom, I'll turn this over to you.
Okay, I will be brief. But I will just kind of describe the petition here. This is coming to us from, as you said, NP Building Partners, which is the group associated with North Point Orthopedics. They're in the process of constructing a new medical office building at 9445 Calumet Avenue. In your staff report on the screen, you'll see the location highlighted. This project has been approved by the Plan Commission and received a number of variances from the Board of Zoning Appeals at the time that it was initially proposed. Those include I won't give you the citations, but it's essentially a waiver of the requirement to provide a service road, perimeter roadway, and parking facilities. A variance to install fewer than the minimum required parking spaces, a variance to install less internal landscaping and fewer trees within the proposed parking lot, and then a variance to permit parking closer than 20 feet to the front lot line. So those were the original variances given to the project. I'm going to pull up here this. This is a site plan. You can kind of see. Back it up a little bit. This is the most recent site plan that they provided to the board. As they were constructing the project, they discovered that the pipeline, which runs through here, you can see. Can you see my mouse?
Yes.
Okay. So there's a pipeline that roughly follows the east property line, and it runs parallel to the property line, approximately 60 feet from the center line of Columbia Avenue. And there's a 60-foot easement, so 30 feet on either side of that pipeline, that they have shown in this map here as a dotted line. So if you see this, that's actually a dashed line. Within that easement right here is a pipeline, a Wolverine pipeline. So as they were in the process of constructing the building, they met with representatives of Wolverine who advised them that a previously approved landscaping plan, which included trees in this area here, and so trees along the parking lot, and then trees within the parkway would not be permitted based on the rights of Wolverine to essentially restrict anything greater than 5 feet, anything that will grow higher than 5 feet within their easement. So they are now seeking a variance in order to waive the requirement to plant those parkway trees, which I just showed you. Actually, these are the parkway trees, and also the trees within the parking lot buffer.
So just along the Columbia Avenue side.
Correct. So the standard is within a parkway, trees are to be planted every 30 feet. Shade trees, I should say. The large trees are to be planted every 30 feet with the intent to kind of have a continuous canopy. And same thing basically within the parking lot buffer. There's a standard that you have trees planted every 30 feet if they're shade trees, or planted closer together if they're smaller, more ornamental trees. We kind of reviewed the materials that they had provided to us, and they provided some legal documents which have been reviewed by our attorney. And Dave Wickland, if you care to provide any commentary, you can. Otherwise, I'll say that he's advised us that the claims of Wolverine are legitimate in this instance, and so we're kind of inclined to believe that there is a difficulty for North Point Orthopedics in planting trees in this area. So it appears to be a legitimate claim.
It is, health and safety reasons mandate the fact that Wolverine does have the authority to prohibit trees in the pipeline easement. And as I said, health and safety, the law favors Wolverine in this particular case.
I'm sorry, I can't hear Mr. Wickland.
I'll speak up. A little better?
A little bit better, David.
All right, Stuart.
You really got to yell. Well, essentially what he said is that he believes North Point and the literature, and it appears that, for health or for safety reasons, Wolverine's claims are legitimate. So, so having said that, we took a closer look at the plans that were presented in connection with the variance. And I just have kind of two comments. One, we did notice that the easement, which is not shown on this one, but I'll take it back to the previous site plan. You'll notice that the easement ends approximately right here, which leaves about a 10-foot wide strip of land adjacent to Columbia Avenue, in which, and I confirmed with Wolverine, in which parkway trees could be planted. And then
When you go to page 5, Tom, was the items in red that you were circling areas where they were deficient in parkway trees?
yeah, so based on kind of that analysis that we did, we took a look at the site plan, and we're recommending that although it's clear that they cannot plant any trees in that parking lot buffer because of the Wolverine easement, there does appear to be some areas where additional trees could be planted to offset the variance that they would be seeking. So this 10-foot area, as I mentioned, could be planted with essentially a continuous canopy of ornamental trees. So they could fill that in. There are a number of areas here shown in red where they could kind of fill in those gaps. And then actually the parkway along Columbia Avenue is also wide enough that they could plant trees within that. So the recommendation that I'm giving as sort of a staff person is to approve the variance for that parking lot buffer because it's pretty clear that there's a difficulty there. But I don't recommend approving the variance for the parkway trees because I don't see any reason why they can't install those trees at a sort of a closer interval to have that continuous canopy and to make up for the diminishment of the landscaping within the property.
And that's in your staff report, both those items.
Correct. And I'll just point out too that tonight they have advertised for the public hearing. So there should be a public hearing tonight.
Yes.
That concludes my report. I'll put the proposed landscaping plan back on the screen.
Thank you, Tom. Any questions for staff?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
So, Tom, this question is for Tom. So, Tom, I guess I'm not quite understanding if the easement goes from the line in the parking lot that's parallel to Columbia Avenue, and it's 60 foot wide, then why do you have a red boxed area there parallel to Columbia Avenue?
That red box area is outlining this. I'll go back to the site plan that shows the easement. If you see this line that I'm pointing to,
Right.
my cursor here, that's the extent of the Wolverine easement. So between this line and the curb line of Columbia Avenue, there is no easement. So that the easement extends from here
Over to the parking lot area, right there,
Oh,
right there.
okay.
The line is here.
So it doesn't go to the curb, it doesn't go all the way to the curb.
Correct.
Okay.
There are overhead NIPSCO lines, utility lines through this area.
Okay.
Again, which is why they also are stuck in the sense that they cannot plant any shade trees or large trees within that area just because there are overhead wires that would, NIPSCO would come and cut those down. So they do have, there is a case to be made that they can't implement the landscaping plan that they had initially proposed.
Right.
But they would do it, Tom, with certain trees. You said ornamental trees? Is that what you said?
So the town maintains a list of trees that are suitable for planting underneath or within close proximity to overhead utility lines. And those are, they're smaller trees. They're what you might consider ornamental trees.
So
So
if you
what
might-
oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Stuart.
I just want to ask, so how high would those trees be? I just, forgive my ignorance, but it's a New Yorker talking.
They're usually less than 20 feet, aren't they, Tom?
Yeah, they get to be about, 10 to 15 feet high.
So 10 to 15 feet high would not interfere with the NIPSCO utility lines.
Correct.
Okay, that's what I wanted to ask.
So, Tom, the trees that are in the buffer, are those trees or are those that are shown now, are those shrubs or are those trees?
Those are shrubs.
These are shrubs. This is like a hedge.
Okay, so, and that can remain, or those have to go too?
Those can remain. That's their proposed drawing, right, Tom? Taking the trees out and putting some hedges down there?
Yes.
But
Okay.
you're saying they could take the trees out and relocate them in spots around the property that they're bare, and they can add some more of those trees where they're deficient in the Columbia Avenue around the property.
That is my recommendation.
Okay. Any other questions for Tom before I bring it to the petitioner? Tom, is there someone here to speak on behalf of the petitioner?
Yeah, there are a few people here, and I'll just ask if you could state your name and your affiliation.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Marty Murphy. I'm an architecture partner with Alliance Architects. Our office is at 929 Lincoln Way East in South Bend. I'm joining you today as one of our project architects, Andy Mollison, and then Dr. Greg McCombs representing the North Point Partners. He's also in the room with us today. The variance, as Tom, variance request, as Tom pointed out, is to give us relief on the landscaping requirements along the east property line, Columbia Avenue. That's the only property line that's affected here. Calumet stays as it was proposed, south stays as it's proposed, and north stays as it's proposed. But we do have the issue along Columbia. And it's basically driven, as Tom pointed out correctly, by Wolverine, the safety concern, and their ability to maintain and inspect that pipeline. As we understand it now, they fly drones along the routes here, and tree cover conceals some of that, so that's the issue. There was a comment made in last month's meeting about due diligence. I'd like to speak to that in just a minute. The survey and the title work did show indeed the existence of that pipeline easement. And it was tied to a document that was dated from 1969 and is included in your packet as Exhibit C. And what that did was confirm the property owner's rights regarding parking, drives, utilities, fences, and landscaping within that easement. In addition to that, the existing funeral home, which was on that property and was showed by the survey, also showed parking, drives, utilities, and landscaping on that easement. It also showed a sign, which we're not proposing at this point, but really the due diligence did not give us any hint that there was going to be a problem here. The issue was triggered by the contractor reaching out to coordinate with Wolverine. And I would note that the other correspondence that's included in your packet reference policies and interpretations that have occurred since that 1969 Exhibit C document was produced, including the Pipeline Safety Act, which I think is really probably the big one here. We don't dispute the fact that Wolverine needs to be able to inspect that pipeline, but I would say that we acted in good faith in not being aware of those things. We submitted the site plan originally. I'm going to also say that North Point has acted in good faith and delivered on every single commitment that they made before this board. And they're prepared to deliver on this. I would say that landscape design that was approved by this board is under contract by the contractor. We can insist on them installing that, but we have been told as soon as that gets installed, it's coming down because Wolverine is going to take it down. But North Point is prepared to do that. They've got it under contract, but we just want to be reasonable here and work through it. Really, North Point is caught in the middle on this. There's no reason to there's no reason to challenge Wolverine on their requirements. I think we just have to work through it. But I'd like to pause a minute here and just give you a play-by-play, point-by-point, how the new proposed site plan, landscaping plan compares with the other one. As I said before, no changes along Calumet. The only changes are along Columbia. Before, we showed an 8-foot parking buffer, that remains. Before, we showed a 5-foot high fence, ornamental metal fence, that remains. Before, we showed a monument sign, we backed off that, we removed it. Before, we showed some 140 shrubs along that fence line, those remain. Now, in addition to that, we're adding another 35 north of the driveway that weren't shown before. So we're up to 175 plantings along that fence line. New trees along the fence, we're deleting 6 maples, but then coming back in with 12 dense spreading yews. So that's along the fence line in the parking lot buffer. So if the intent of the parking lot buffer is to screen views from the street into the parking lot, I submit that we are still very much in the spirit of what we proposed before. In terms of the thoroughfare trees, these are the trees in the parkway. 3 of those trees are existing. Those are the big circles that you see on the plan. What we're proposing is deleting 5 maples, but then adding 3 flowering plums. Now, we weren't aware of your list of preferred species, but we certainly, coordinate what the preferred list of species is. The selection of the flowering plums had to do with lower height and smaller spreading circumference that would screen the views. So we're certainly open to those kinds of considerations and tweaking it that way. But I would say this, North Point is spending a lot of money on the site. They are determined to have a wonderful product both for their business and for the city of Munster. They're going to be proud of the investment that they're making here. It's in everyone's interest to get this right along Columbia. We're certainly committed to doing that. What we've been told, and we're going to have comments from some of the neighbors here, that if we plant trees underneath that NIPSCO overhead electrical, they're going to come in and take them down. But I'd rather let them tell you from firsthand experience than me come up here and tell you what I've got here to say.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Does anyone on the board have any questions for Mr. Murphy and the team at North Point? Mr. Murphy, I have a question for you. Would you be willing to work with Tom and our staff regarding relocating some of the trees as he was stating in the earlier comments he made?
Yes, absolutely. Those trees are already under contract. We're paying for them anyway. We might want to tweak the species depending on where the location is. But yeah, we got those trees already bought.
Okay. And my other question, Mr. Murphy, I happen to do a lot of biking in town, and I was biking down Calumet Avenue the other day. And there was a couple kids riding in front of me, and they fell down on your sidewalk on Calumet Avenue, okay? And I stopped there. They were fine and stuff like that. But I noticed that the sidewalk part they fell down with, you poured a new section of sidewalk, and they fell down on the old 30-year-old sidewalk. I hope your intention is that you're putting a new sidewalk in there that matches the rest of the sidewalk on Columbia as well as Calumet, because I was kind of shocked after I saw him fall down on the sidewalk and realized how old that sidewalk was when I looked at it.
I don't believe we're taking it out at 100%. A lot of the stuff on Calumet is going to get caught up in that road project, isn't it? I guess I'm not clear on exactly where you're pointing, but it was not 100% replacement, I don't believe. I've got the drawing here though.
Because I'm pretty sure that's probably about a 30-year-old sidewalk, looking at all the cracks and the weeds sticking out of all the cracks, Like I said, I saw a kid fall down on it. Tom, if people just signed in, can you mute their...
Roland, I just checked the site plan. The south half of the Calumet public sidewalk is being replaced and the north half stays.
Okay.
Existing remain.
Any other questions for the petitioner? That being said, Tom, I'll open it up since it's a public hearing and all the meeting requirements have been met. I will open it up to the public hearing. Can you let us know if there's anyone here, either online or in person, that would like to speak on behalf of this petition?
Yeah, Roland, we have some folks here in the room
Okay.
who are approaching the podium.
Okay. Please state your name and address for the public record when you come up to the microphone.
And if you could sign in as well.
Tom, I'm not sure if they can hear us or not, you know?
They can.
Okay.
Hi.
Yes, just please state your name and address.
Okay, Janet Watson, 9333 Calumet Avenue. So I am the neighbor to the north of this lovely new building. We are pleased with the look, and the plans for the landscaping look great. We are interested in Columbia Avenue because we either own or manage 5 buildings along Columbia Avenue to the north of this new one. And we're interested in a good resolution to this so that as any other landscaping needs to be done along Columbia, we don't run into problems, and that we understand exactly what it is that you want and what will be accepted. You know, it's too bad that the pipeline is in conflict with what the city would like, but I believe that the solution to this is not trees at all in this parkway between Columbia and the parking lots, but it would be better if it were done with like islands of grass and bushes, because of course we can't put trees on the pipeline easement. And as was stated, there's overhead lines, there's big NIPSCO lines above the 10 feet that is between the easement and the street. And if you try and stick a tree of any decent size, NIPSCO is going to come along and chop the top off and make it look awful. The other thing is it being only if it were planted so that its canopy wouldn't infringe on the pipeline, which is what's required. It's going to be a spindly little tree, and it's not probably going to do very well being only 5 feet from such a busy public street, which was this kind of environment with all the snow and the whatever chemicals get pushed on it. So I think that if they did a nice planting, and if it would be accepted, that there wouldn't necessarily be trees there, but it would be more grasses and bushes that could be well maintained and continually look good, instead of spindly trees that would have to be replaced more often. With me, I have Lori Christoph, who is the office manager, and she has dealt with a couple of these problems before in other properties that we've managed. And if you'll allow her to speak for a minute, that'd be great.
Sure, please state your name and address for public record.
Hi, Lori Christoph. I'm going to give my work address, the 9333 Calumet Avenue here in Munster. We manage several properties here in Munster, and one is the townhomes of White Estates, which is right off of Somerset and White Avenue. And probably about 5 years ago, BP was doing a pressure test of their line that runs through it. It ruptured. It was behind James Edward Drive and Cricket Court. When it ruptured, they came in and completely tore up everything that was in there, everything. It does show on Winfield, the pipeline showing that it is there. When they came in, they leveled out all the trees. Of course, the board of directors for that HOA worked with BP and the attorneys to see what we could get planted back in there. And we went back and forth and back and forth. They would not let us plant one tree even 5 feet off of the easement area, because they said it cannot encroach into that easement. So what they did is came up with a resolution regarding the plantings, and they put in islands of grass with flowering things, which survive very well there and look very nice. And if you drive around in Cherville down 41, you'll see a lot of that has grass that are closer to the street that are more hardy to survive. I have talked to Tom and even Chris now at 9307 Calumet Avenue, which actually butts up along Columbia. That one of the doctors is doing a large remodel there that's requiring more landscaping to be done on the outside. And NIPSCO came in probably, I think it was last year in the summer, completely leveled all the trees that were in that easement area. I talked to Chris from Public Works about getting trees replanted there. He said it would be done this year. We started working with them. We asked if we could pay a little bit more money, pay money to have them larger. He came back and said, we cannot touch any of that area in there. So Tom says between the easement and the street we're allowed, but it can't encroach into the easement area of the Wolverine line. So I agree with Mrs. Watson in regards to the islands and doing something without trees. Because we have other properties, the Sandwich, which is right by a community hospital that we maintain and take care of. So we like to see the greenery, we like to see bushes, we like to do stuff. We can't do trees, I don't believe. I mean, that's not what I'd like to see.
Thank you very much for your comments.
Thank you.
Tom, is there anyone else here to speak tonight?
I don't see anyone in the room. Let me check if anyone put their hand up on Zoom. I can. Oh, yes. All right. Okay, bear with me a second, Lou. Let me find you.
Yeah, I think I unmuted. Can you hear me? Or?
Yes. Yeah.
All right. Well, good evening. My name is Lou Kraus, and I am Wolverine Pipeline Company's real estate professional. And I'm here tonight to kind of make sure that Wolverine, all the things I've helped Tom with and the landowner with, make our position clear. And, a lot of what has been discussed is in line with what I was going to say tonight. For example, no trees and easements, and trying to work with you to find a beautification plan that, matches the intent without violating Wolverine's easement. And I felt that, as a small point of clarification, we do inspect the right of way, as someone mentioned earlier. We don't do it with a drone. We do it with a fixed wing airplane. I wanted to clarify that. And, I wanted to say that it's true that if there were to be a canopy that encroached the easement, there is when we have a tree clearing crew perform maintenance, it could be side trimmed. So I certainly support a beautification plan that would, maximize the property's aesthetic appeal, but still be consistent with the safety and health risks that are minimized by not having trees. So if there's any questions, I wanted to be here to answer them as a Wolverine representative, but that's really the whole point of why I'm here. So if there's any questions, please let me know.
Are there any questions for Wolverine Pipeline from the commission? Thank you.
You're welcome.
Tom, is there anyone else here to speak from the public?
Yeah, Dr. Greg McComas is here.
Okay.
So you're the applicant, so you have the floor outside the public hearing, but if you want to speak.
Yeah, we can close. Let's do the public hearing first, because we can bring Dr. McComas back with the petitioner. Tom, anyone else with the public hearing?
No, that's no one else.
That being said, we will close the public hearing, bring it back to the board. Dr. McComas, the floor is yours.
So thank you, gentlemen and ladies, for this meeting, for the opportunity to speak tonight. As Marty Murphy had said earlier, it's our intent to beautify this property and this building, something that will last well past our lifetimes. It is not our intent to put up a building that you can see the parking lot. We have worked very diligently to try to come up with a solution for this Columbia Avenue side. And I think what Mrs. Watson has said with the grasses and everything else really appeals to me, because it's low maintenance, it'll look year round, look good, and it'll be very hardy and something that we don't have to worry about down the road. It will require less water, which is something that we need to pay attention to also. And I just want to again thank you for the opportunity to present our
Thank you, Dr. Matomas. The building's looking really nice in Calumet, by the way.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions for Dr. McComas and his team? Being none, I'll give you my opinion. I think we could dress that Columbia Avenue up like Miss Watson and Dr. McComas said, with different grasses and stuff like that, that meets the requirements of Wolverine Pipeline. And obviously, since the petitioner stated they bought the trees that go in the area, I think we should look at locations as Tom presented about placing those trees around the property to fill in bare areas. That's my opinion.
Mr. Chairman, I would agree with you, and I would make a motion to approve this request with the caveat, that the the Columbia Avenue side that was red boxed would be planted with decorative tall grasses in lieu of trees.
There's a motion on the floor. And then, Ms. Mayor, did you also recommend taking those trees and moving around the property in the spots that you could fill in other areas safely?
Yes, include that as well, yes.
Thank you. We have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
Question?
Yes, Mr. Buck, is it Mr. Bucks? I can't see.
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Is the motion on both the requested variances then? Just one single motion?
Yeah, well, if that works, yes.
If that's the case, then I'll second Ms. Mayor's motion.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the motion? Being none, Tom, would you please call roll?
Sharon Mayer,
Yes.
Stuart Freeman,
Yes.
Daniel Buxa,
Yes.
Jonathan Peterson,
Yes.
Roland Raffin.
Yes.
Motion
Thank you,
carried.
Dr. McComas and your team. And we look forward to seeing the building completed soon. Tom, the next item we have in a public hearing is both regarding Danny Z's. Did you want to address these together, or did you want to address these separately? Since it's a public hearing, you want to address it separately?
I think they should be addressed separately because
Okay.
they're not necessarily, they're connected, but they're not interdependent.
Okay, then we'll start with the BZA docket number 20-009. Daniel Zunica requesting approval of a conditional use permit for a covered patio at Danny Z's Restaurant at 1860 45th Street. Tom, would you give us a brief presentation on this?
Yes, I will. Let me pull this up here for you. Let me see. Let me find a good rendering here for you. That's pretty good. Okay, this is, unfortunately, this is a little bit sideways, but it'll give you a sense of what we're talking about here. The proposal for BZA docket number 20-009 is brought by Daniel Zunica, and he's requesting approval of a conditional use permit for a covered patio at the Danny Z's Restaurant, which is located at 1860 45th Street. You'll see on the screen here that there is, let me go back to it's not really a good site plan. I can show you other than this.
You blow that one up. You kind of show the layout of the existing and the new with the shaded lines, right?
Yeah, so the Danny Z's Restaurant is located here. This is 45th Street. They have an existing kind of covered arcade patio area, and they're seeking to expand that.
Right.
The existing patio is, I believe, 445 square feet, and they're adding 648 square feet to that patio. So they're extending to the west into the parking lot. And They're eliminating, currently there are 3 parking spaces located here in this footprint. 2 of them are ADA spaces. They're relocating those here and adding an aisle here, ADA access aisle, and then they're eliminating 1 of the parking spaces. So that's essentially the extent of the project. Because it is an outdoor dining use, that's a conditional use in our zoning ordinance. So it requires a favorable recommendation by the Plan Commission and approval by the Town Council.
By the Board of Zoning Appeals.
I'm sorry, yes, by the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Right.
In the past, I can tell you that the board has brought up a couple different issues related to these types of applications. One of them is safety and proximity to a road. As you can see in this proposal, they are nowhere near 45th Street. They're located within the parking lot. The entire thing is surrounded by a curb, so staff doesn't have any safety concerns. In terms of access, they're providing a new ADA compliant ramp here, as well as 2 ADA spaces and an ADA compliant egress route to the south here. And then finally, there's always a concern when you have outdoor dining that it will generate a lot of noise and be a disturbance to the neighbors. In this case, the nearest residential property is about 225 feet to the north. So again, staff doesn't have any concerns that this will be, disruptive to the neighborhood in any way. I will just mention that they are also seeking a variance to waive the requirement that they install parking lot landscaping. So there's no landscaping proposed as part of this. Typically, on an investment of this magnitude, you would see some additional landscaping added to bring it up to the code. But again, that's being dealt with under a separate.
That's the next item. So we'll stick to this right now. Does anyone have any questions for Tom before I bring up the petitioner?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Ms. Mayor.
I just have a bit of knowledge that I need to impart on this.
Okay.
So when this building was built about 17 years ago, I, at that time, was working for the contractor that built it. I was the project manager for the construction of this building. Back then, it was built, the main purpose of it was going to be for the beef O'Brady's, you might remember.
Oh, yeah.
So I just wanted to bring that up. I also have the architect of this addition to the building is a good friend of mine. But both of these factors, I don't believe will affect my, decision-making on this petition.
Thank you, Ms. Mayor.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Ms. Buxa.
it appears that this is an expedited process. I was wondering if you could explain that.
Tom, would you like to talk about this, that we talked about, that since there's a process that you can set these small matters for public hearing and do it in one meeting where you don't need legally a preliminary hearing. Tom and I discussed as a chairman of the board about helping streamline some of this process, about bringing it to a public hearing in one meeting. And if the board was never comfortable with something, we can always continue it to another month. But sometimes we tend to delay some of these projects that are, simpler in nature by making it a 2-month process, or it could be streamlined to a 1-month process. Is that correct, Tom, me stating that?
That is correct. There's no requirement in our zoning or in state statute that requires a preliminary hearing. We had met with this applicant at a site plan review committee meeting, and they had expressed kind of a sense of urgency to try to get the project approved as quickly as possible, primarily because of the situation with the COVID pandemic and the restrictions on indoor dining, the need for social distancing. And the thought was that the expansion of the patio would allow them to serve their customer base in a way that was more, in keeping with historical trends of numbers of customers and that sort of thing. So yeah, we discussed it, Roland and I, and Roland had agreed to, at least at this meeting, allow for a public hearing to take place. So we advised that they could advertise for the public hearing.
So, Mr. Chairman, a follow-up question or maybe a statement.
Yes, Mr. Buxton.
I'm generally inclined to support this project. I think it makes sense. The only concern I have is any precedential value that this expedition of the process has. So I'm just a little concerned about that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Buxton. A lot of things have changed. I mean, I've seen recently some other towns similar as ours with especially these kind of projects. I think Chowbrella and Cherville just did the same thing. Obviously, they're trying to have a business model to survive during this time. Legally, it's acceptable, and sometimes I think we need to take care of some of these businesses in town to be able to streamline the process on something that's a little easier to decide on. And we can always bring it back to the board, and we can always table any kind of item that's on our agenda for another month if not comfortable with passing something in a 1 month meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Yes, Ms. Mayor.
Well, actually, two questions. So the first question is the streamline related to both variance request and the recommendation request, or is it just for one or the other?
Are you talking about both items that are on the docket tonight?
Yes.
Yes, they both are up for a public hearing tonight. And like I said, we can discuss, and I mean, it's the board's pleasure on however we move on this agenda item tonight, whether it passes, is declined, or if it's tabled.
Okay.
So that's a pleasure to commission on any of these items, of course.
Sure. So, and the other question I had was, because from what I recall in the past on that particular property, that it was under a PUD, I thought, because there's been multiple projects gone on in that, that shopping center over the years. And the landscaping, I thought, was, the owner of the property is McShane. So I thought that would fall under McShane's with regard to the landscaping. So I'm a little confused about how this would fall to Danny Z's.
Tom, maybe you could address that.
That's a good point. The property is no longer a PUD. It was rezoned as part of our major, overhaul of the zoning code last year. With respect to who is responsible for the landscaping, we don't necessarily care, I guess you could say. The rules are, when a project is initiated on a piece of property, someone has to do that work, okay? And the person doing the work is, if they pay for it, if Danny Z's pays for it or is responsible for it ultimately, or if Brian McShane is ultimately responsible for it, it's kind of neither here nor there in this instance, because Dan Zunica has an ownership interest in the property as a lessee or a lessor, as a renter of the property. He is able to submit an application for the variance.
So I have a question.
Yes, Mr. Freeman.
Maybe David Wicklund has to answer it. If it's a conditional use permit, it's being granted to Daniel Zunica, who is not the owner of the property, but just the tenant. Once his lease ends, does that conditional permit use then expire, or does it go to the McShanes who own the property?
I would say it continues in the owner's name. And by the way, this is, in my view, perfectly legal. There's nothing in the statute or the new ordinance that prohibits it.
So the
Also,
conditional use permit would continue if there was a restaurant leased by another owner and there was no physical change to the outside patio, what have you?
yes, that's my opinion, Stuart.
Okay.
In any event, Mr. Zuniga has finally also notified the public his notices are in proper form.
Thank you, Mr. Wickland.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, I couldn't hear who that was.
Yeah, that's Stuart. I have
Yes, Mr. Freeman.
another question concerning this. Well, really a comment. Tom, is that brick that's going to be on the outside of this patio? In the drawings?
It just looks like a stone veneer, doesn't it?
Yeah, it is a,
It's probably a cultured stone, I'm guessing.
it's a natural form stone, and if you want to ask specifics, the contractor is here. He can answer some more specifics about the building materials. But
Okay,
yeah,
I was just curious because we've had these patio additions before us, but this is probably the most attractive one I've seen in a long time.
I agree, Mr. Freeman. It's a nice looking addition to the building.
Mhm.
Any other questions for Tom? If not, I'll turn it over to the petitioner to speak on this.
One last question.
Yes, Ms. Mayor.
So, and this is regarding the landscaping. So
Don't
whatever.
forget, that's the next item.
Oh, okay, then I'll wait. Go ahead.
Separately, yeah.
Tom, is someone here to speak on behalf of the petitioner?
yes, they're approaching the podium.
Please state your name and address for the public record.
Good evening, I'm Tom Ulo Designs, 680 Lakeshore Drive, Chicago. I'm the project manager and designer of the space. I did the work on the Danny Z's addition a year and a half ago, and the relocation of the Dante space in the same building. Basically, what we have here is an addition to the existing outdoor seating area, and as Tom indicated, that we're really trying to add a little bit more seating to the outside, as we can see that with the COVID-19 issue going on, spaces all around the country are working better with outdoor seating as any way that we can space people out a little bit better. The spaces, it'll allow us to add another 28 seats to an existing 14 seat space as it is now. We feel it really adds some charm to the end of the building. The building is basically, just a very simple structure. We added the awnings to the north side of the building, and with this canopy on the outside, we're using the same umbrella material. Keeping it a rigid member, we're putting a waterproofing underneath it so that it stays intact and doesn't blow in the wind and doesn't collapse. And as you can see, the material we're using it's really the high end of Unilock material. It's a relatively new product. It's a cultured stone that's finished, rough edge finished on inside and outside. So it's basically called a retaining wall. And the columns, same way, are put together in such a way that they're individual members that literally stack. So we really feel that this really adds charm to the building. Color is going to be in keeping with what we have in the building. And as I said earlier, the awnings will match the awnings that we have on the north side of the building so that it has one continuous look throughout the property. The existing, there's some existing trees north and the south end of the property. We intend to keep those in place, and whatever shrubbery is in place on the north and south end of the patio will remain. And normally on the brick walls themselves around the perimeter are sitting at about 48 inches high. And customarily, although the rendering does not show that, we customarily like to put planting on the top of those so it spills over ivy or some sort of planting on it. We're doing a ventless fireplace on the inside, so it creates an atmosphere to the space. And as you can see, the entranceway going in, the handicap accessibility entrance, we're hitting a pergola over that area so that it just creates more identity for the entrance coming into the space. Excuse me. The location of the parking
relocation of the handicap parking is the closest space that we feel we can get to it and put the handicap accessible signs in an area that doesn't destroy the asphalt on the parking lot as it is right now. So we felt that, going about this, it seemed to be the most practical solution for what Dan needs in the space. We're doing new signage that's in accordance with the new signage criteria that the city has recently developed. That said, I know the picture is kind of skewed. We have a couple of others, and we also have Tom Fabric, the architect, on Zoom as well. And if you have any questions for Tom, Dan Zunick is here with me as well for any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for the petitioner? Tom, since it's a public hearing, is there anyone here? We'll open up the public hearing. Is there anyone here to speak on behalf of the public regarding this project?
I see no one.
And no one's in virtual land, right?
Let me check if anyone's raising their hand. Zoom here. Bear with me a second. I don't see any raised hands.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Tom. That being said, I'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the board. What is the pleasure of the board? And remember, would only be a motion to forward to the town council a recommendation.
Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion to send this to the town council for approval.
We have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Mr. Chairman, I second the motion.
Mr. Buxa seconds. Tom, would you please call roll? Or first of all, any other discussion? Being none, Tom, would you please call roll?
Sharon Mayer,
Yes.
Stuart Friedman.
I got it, Linda.
How did you get it?
Hold on a second.
The same one I
Want
think I was
to mute
supposed
the
to get.
microphones, Tom?
Yeah, looking for the right one.
Same way that we did.
Okay, there we go. I'm sorry. I did not get Stuart's.
Yes. Did you hear me, Tom?
Yes, I did. Now, Dan Buxa,
Yes.
Jonathan Peterson,
Yes.
and Chairman Raffin.
Yes. Motion passes. The next item is BZA docket number 20-010, Daniel Zenica, requesting approval of a developmental standard variance from section 26-6, 405 P1E on the Munster zoning ordinance to waive the required landscaping for a building addition. Tom, the floor is yours. And
Okay, I will not describe the petition because it's identical to the previous, but I'll just note that our landscaping code requires, in the instance where there's a project involving a building addition, that landscaping be installed as well. And the amount of landscaping that's required is essentially all the landscaping requirements that are listed in our code. This boils down to essentially two things for this project. It would be parking area landscaping, which is landscaping islands within the parking lot. So every row of parking has to terminate in a landscape island, and every 10 spaces you need a landscape island. There's additional kind of more detailed guidance for those islands, but that's the requirement that they would have to do. The second requirement is parking lot screening. And what this is essentially a hedge screen, an ornamental fence, and shade trees planted at 30 feet intervals. So it's similar to what North Point Orthopedics was required to do. I'll just note a couple things. So they're requesting essentially that we waive the, through a variance, we waive the requirement, essentially that trigger that would require them to install landscaping. I'll just note that there is already a parking lot screen to a certain degree of the length of the property. It doesn't quite conform to our design requirements, which are, you know, as I said, a hedge, shade trees and ornamental fencing, but there is a landscape buffer. There is no landscaping islands whatsoever in the parking lot currently. And then I'll just note a couple things. One, Sharon, you brought this up with the last petition. It is a little bit of a unique situation because this is an outlot in a much larger development. And so under the strict application of the code, the entire parking lot would have to be landscaped according to our standards. And I think it's clear that in this situation, the applicant doesn't use the entire parking lot and is not necessarily responsible for it. And then the other item that I'll mention is that the specific variance was to waive the requirement under this particular circumstance, which was a building addition. So if the board did approve that variance tonight, what it would do is it would waive it for this particular situation. But because I know that the property owner has plans to do various improvements, any future improvements would have to still comply with that landscaping code. So we're just essentially waiving that trigger portion. We're not waiving the standards in perpetuity. That was not the request.
Okay, is there any questions for Tom?
Yeah.
Mr. Friedman?
Basically, so as I understand it, we do not have the ability to require landscaping just for this particular outlot?
Tom?
If you're asking me,
Or Mr. Wickland, I mean, why can't we require I mean, look, I want to be fair to Mr. Zanika. Restaurants are in peril right now with the pandemic, but it seems to be a very small area. I mean, if they're going to have a patio and people are going to sit outside, it would be nice to have some limited landscaping. So is it, we cannot, I wonder why we can't require landscaping just for this particular outlet.
so this is one lot, as you can see on the image on the screen. It is a single lot. I use the term outlot maybe a little bit too loosely. It hasn't been subdivided into a separate lot. The question as far as whether we could require that, that would be something that the board would have to grant as far as a variance. And the variance would be essentially a limit to the amount of landscaping that they would have to install. As I said, the strict application of the code, I believe, would say that the entire parking lot would be subject to it. But if the desire of the board is to grant not a variance for that, but a variance to waive it for, you know, a section of the parking lot or the majority of the parking lot, that would be something that you could do.
Well, obviously, you know, I don't want to be difficult, but I mean, I think the BZA, the board should consider, I mean, if he's going to do a patio and he's spending some decent money doing this, whether or not we can require that there be landscaping just around this particular restaurant. It doesn't have to be extensive, but something, because they're basically sitting in a patio in the middle of all of this concrete. But, you know, this is something to be considered by the board. I'm just expressing my thoughts.
Stuart, this is Dave Wickland. I agree with Tom. I agree that you can require minimal landscaping if that's your desire as a board.
Thank you, Mr. Wickland. Tom, I would have to say that looking at this, you know, I don't think we need to add a bunch of curbs and islands in this property. Just looking at the different amount of users in this whole property in a whole. But is there a way down 45th Street we can increase the landscaping as a buffer to kind of minimize the look of the big strip mall from 45th Street?
I would respond that, yes, we could ask that they do that. Unfortunately, I think that in this instance, because that strip of land is owned by not the applicant doesn't own that property. So I guess whatever we suggest that they do, they would have to go back and seek approval from the owner of the property.
I mean, even if they spruce it up the length of the Danny Z's building, you know? Ms. Mayor, you have a question?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman. Well, I'm just wondering if, you know, around the patio addition itself, if there couldn't be a, you know, maybe an extension, you know, maybe just a curb right around that western side and add some landscaping along there. They, you know, they put a tree out on the north side of the addition. So maybe just wrapping around the west side and some additional landscaping around there, just around the patio itself.
Well, Tom, how wide is that? I mean, how wide is that aisleway between the building addition and the parking spots? Could they bring a curb out and bring some green space in front of the patio addition? Right there?
Are you referring to this area right here?
Yes. You know, length of the addition and around the, you know?
I don't believe they could be there. If you look at the sort of the footprint of this patio, this used to be parking spaces, and there is landscaping here and there's landscaping here. And so these were kind of like two peninsulas or islands or whatever. They look like this one, right? And so they've extended it into those parking spaces, so they can't really extend it any farther, or else they would lose the
aisle
width of their drive aisle.
Well, there's a lot of parking there, so.
That's what I mean. If you lost
I
that,
mean,
if you lost that drive aisle, would that be the worst thing, Tom?
Right.
I mean, there is so much parking when you pull up to that place.
I guess that's a question for the owner, you know, how do they feel about that?
So, if I may interject here, one of the plans here is on the top of the knee walls around the space, you know, it is stone. We intend seasonally to put planting that will spill over on the wall, dropping down some sort of an ivy or you know, a planting on the west side of the building. Certainly we intend, you know, there's trees on the north and the south side for landscaping as well. And we really feel that adding the planting to the west side of it will really help some of the concerns that you may have here. So, you know, although the rendering doesn't really show the existing trees that are there, our intention is to create some planting on the top of those knee walls at 48 inches high that will spill down. So we really feel that will be a very impressive bumper as you're approaching the property.
As I bring this back to a board, I'm going to ask you a question. Should this be something that we have the petitioner work with staff regarding to come up with some green space ideas regarding this property? Obviously, the petitioner is going to get his, we sent a favorable recommendation to council, still has a vote on this building addition. And I can't speak if they're going to pass this or not on their behalf. But is this something we should look at having them have someone draw up a landscape plan and what they could do on this property and work with the owner to see, to raise the standards in this area a little bit?
Mr. Chairman, I just want to state for the record, I'm not interested in requiring the petitioner to have landscaping. I'm bringing up the subject. And so I think your idea has merit that, you know, we would vote as we are without putting requirements, but therefore let them go to the drawing table with the staff and see whether they can come up with an idea of some green space.
I mean, I think that the dialogue needs to include McShane.
Motion.
Mr. Chairman.
I would say so to the property owner.
Mr. Chairman.
But at this point, do we have information to vote on anything tonight?
I'm sorry, the speaking is garbled. I'm not getting good reception.
Roland, you're freezing up a little bit.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
What's the pleasure of the board? Are we looking at tabling this or are we looking at putting to a vote tonight?
No, I'm interested in putting it to a vote.
Okay.
Let them speed ahead because there's the pandemic. He's a restaurant. He wants to do something. I don't want to delay him.
Well, what would your motion be, Mr. Freeman?
My motion would be exactly what the staff report said, to waive the required landscaping for a building addition, but I would add the words, but the BZA would suggest strongly that they attempt to put in some landscaping if they can work it out, something like that.
Mr. Wicklund, what would you say a conditional requirement? What's the technical terms of working
Not
it
really a
out?
conditional requirement.
Right.
Sounds like it sounds to me like the motion is to approve the variance, but with no condition, but to communicate to the applicant encouragement to go beyond the motion.
You know, what you're talking about is though a non-conditional approval with a request that they meet with staff later.
Right.
There'd be no conditions.
You want me to take a stab at saying that, or David, you wanted to?
You should do it.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I would
Yes.
move to approve BZA docket number 20-010, granting a development standard variance from section 26.405 of the Munster zoning ordinance to waive the required landscaping for a building addition, with the suggestion that the developer, the petitioner, has discretionary authority to put in landscaping if they wish to do so.
There's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Chairman,
Yes,
I will
Mr. Peterson.
I will second that motion.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? That being said, Tom, would you please call roll?
Karen Mayer,
Yes.
Stuart Friedman,
Yes.
Daniel Buxa,
Yes.
Jonathan Peterson,
Yes.
Roland Raffin.
Yes. Motion passes. Thank you. Work with staff on the requirements needed to get your permit. The next item we have is the findings of fact. We have BZA 20-005, findings of facts, documents BZA 20-005. Have you had a chance to review this, and what's the pleasure on the board regarding this finding of fact?
Mr. Chairman, I move
Yes.
that we approve the findings of fact as presented for Big Star Development, BZA.
Can Tom, could you put that up on the screen? Because I don't think that was in the packet that I saw.
This was added on Monday, Stuart.
So do you have that on the screen? Can you put that on the screen so I could see it?
Yep.
Thank you.
I'll describe it for you, but essentially what it was a favorable recommendation to the board on the condition that the property was treated as a legal non-conforming use within the CD4A district, and therefore was subject to expire if any one of the normal expiration events occurred, such as destruction, greater than 50%, vacancy, and so forth.
I recollect it now. Okay, so did Mr. Buxton make a motion to approve this?
Yeah.
And
We have
I'll
a second?
second that motion.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Tom, would you please call roll?
Sharon Mayer,
Ms. Mayor? I think I lips.
Sorry, I had it on mute.
Oh, I
Yes.
think it looked like yes. Okay.
okay, I'm sorry. Sharon Mayer, Stuart Friedman,
Yes.
Dan Buxa,
Yes.
Jonathan Peterson,
Yes.
Roland Rathman.
Yes. The next item is findings of facts number 20-006. Stuart, to give you, if you don't have it, that was the one regarding the Olchek family regarding the swimming pool.
I recall. Okay.
Okay. Do we have a motion or anything regarding this finding of fact?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve as presented 20-006.
Thank you, Mr. Buxa. Do we have a second?
I will second that, Mr.
Mr.
Chairman.
Freeman seconds. Tom, would you please call roll?
Sharon Mayer,
Yes.
Stuart Friedman,
Yes.
Daniel Buxa,
Yes.
Jonathan Peterson,
Yes.
Roland Rathman.
Yes. The next item is BZA findings of facts 20-009. This is Danny Z's that was on the agenda tonight regarding their, this was the favorable recommendation to the town council, correct? On the patio addition?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. Do we have a motion regarding 20-009?
I'll make a motion to accept it.
Mr. Freeman, do we have a second?
Yes.
Ms. Mayer seconds. Tom, would you please call roll?
Sharon Mayer,
Yes.
Stuart Friedman,
Yes.
Daniel Buxa,
Yes.
Jonathan Peterson,
Yes.
Roland Rathman.
Yes. Next item, finding of fact 20-010. This was the Danny Z's, I believe, looking through here for the landscaping ordinance, the motion we just passed.
That is correct.
Yep. Do we have a motion regarding this finding of fact?
So does that need to have the wording for
Well, I
about the
believe
landscaping?
I would believe, Tom, we should add that, but it's basically the petitioner has the right to install or not install the landscaping based on the motion that was passed earlier.
Yeah, I would approve the findings of fact with the understanding that Mr. Wickland just adjusts the language to reflect what was discussed tonight.
So we have a motion. Do we have a second? Hello? Who did? That was Stuart's motion. I couldn't hear. Is there a second?
I'm not hearing one yet.
Mr. Chairman, I'll second the motion.
We have Mr. Peterson seconds. Tom, would you please call roll?
Sharon Mayer,
Yes.
Stuart Friedman,
Yes.
Daniel Buxa,
Yes.
Jonathan Peterson,
Yes.
and Roland Rathman.
Yes. The next item is additional items for discussion. Mr. Buxa, I know you had an item you wanted to discuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is regards to BZA petition 20-005, Big Star Development. During the discussion on that petition, staff mentioned that one possible outcome would be to forward to the Planning Commission a rezoning request. And I was just wondering if any of my colleagues on the board would be supportive of that.
So that was the one where the homes behind,
Right up a
was
big
it
road.
behind Milne
Yes,
were changed to commercial, and so you would want it to be rezoned back to residential?
I would be in favor of that, yes.
I'll support that.
So, Mr. Chairman, is this something we should take up on the next agenda, or is this something we can handle right now?
Well, Mr. Chairman, hang on. I think we need to hear from the petitioner. I don't think this is something that we as a board can unilaterally impose upon a petitioner. We don't know what their sentiment is. I do know when they came before us, they were looking for a variance to current usage so they could retain residential use. But I did not hear them speak to future plans for the property. And I don't think we rezoning this without their input, I question whether it would be legal.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I believe the concept was to have the request for the entire vicinity, not just the petitioner's property.
And all of the other properties are residential, correct?
I believe that is correct.
See, here's where I would disagree on that. We went through a year and a half, 2 years of studies with the people that came in from Tennessee that redid our whole zoning and plan for the area. We had public input. We had notices throughout town. Plans were presented with plan-a-paloozas and all that kind of stuff that came up with the idea of these districts throughout town on Ridge Road in the event the train comes. So changing all that, I think we'd have to go through a whole public process of determining what the value of this property is in the future. Now, keeping it legal non-conforming, everyone that owns that property, as long as you don't vacate it for 30 days or whatever the rules are, shut the water off, stays legal non-conforming. But you have the option later on if a developer does want to come in there and build some higher density things in that area, due to the TOD district, we have that option too.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Peterson.
I reiterate my concerns about legality. And I also question whether the Board of Zoning Appeals is the proper place for something like this to either occur. And Mr. Wickland perhaps could comment on that. I think this is something that the town council would have to take up.
I would agree.
I think at most, we could, as a board, offer a resolution suggesting that the town council consider this. I would be in favor of a resolution to that effect, but I don't think we can do anything beyond that.
So, Mr. Chairman, just to clarify, that was my intent, understanding that this board does not have authority to do that on its own authority, but to send a resolution to the Plan Commission as was initially suggested by staff.
And that is correct, Mr. Bucks, that the rezoning would emanate at the plan commission level, then go to the town.
Well, we can put any kind of resolution if a commissioner wants to draft something with our town staff, and we can always put it to a vote to send over to the Plan Commission. There are also 2 members, myself and Mr. Freeman, that sit on both boards, and we can relay that. But I would think it would also have to be above the Plan Commission's head and would have to be something that get passed on to the town council later on if it passed through the Plan Commission, correct?
That is correct.
Certainly. So, Mr. Chairman, can we have this on the agenda for the next meeting?
Yes, we can.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Are there any other items for discussion in our meeting tonight? If not, the next regular business meeting is August 10th, 2020 at 7 o'clock. I will not be there. I will be on in his college at USC. Is there any other item? Do we have a motion to?
Motion to adjourn.
I will second that motion.
Mr. Mosso motions. Do we have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Good night.
Yep, good night.
For those of you who are on the commission as well, we're going to take just a brief recess, and then we'll resume.
Yeah.
We'll,
Tom?
Plan commission meeting in about 5 minutes or so. Yes. See how many people are up here. Seems like you'll be fine. Just make sure you keep up. Been a while. Been all right? I wasn't expecting that. Yeah, sure. Okay, hurry up. Oh, I don't know. I heard that. Absolutely not.
Oh, you didn't join that?
Oh, absolutely. I did the first one. I got the next one. Live mic.
Is there any way that you could have the camera put closer to the speakers at the podium so we could see them? It's difficult to hear them and speak to them or to the members of the board on the dais. Tom, do you?
Or better yet, this is like. I'm not telling you.
Roland?
I'm here.
Do you find it difficult? It's difficult to hear the people to come up to the podium.
I had a hard time hearing anyone besides really Tom.
We got to convey to Tom, there's some way that they can put a camera closer, and also the people that are on the dais are other members of the board who are there physically. It would be nice to be able to see them as well.
Anyone physically there, I had a hard time hearing except for Tom.
So try to figure out how to do that. You're going to be in Southern California next month, right?
I'll be in Los Angeles around the 10th.
Be careful there.
Yes, I know. Campus is kind of a ghost town because it's mostly online learning, except if you're an athlete, you're on site.
Yeah, it's very difficult. I don't know what, I mean, my son is a teacher, in a private school near Princeton, and they have the money to practice social distancing and all that stuff, but I don't know what public schools are going to do.
No, it'll be interesting to see what Munster's plan is next week.
Evidently didn't work.
I tried to get everybody's attention the last, Mr. Whitman, I've been on this thing for almost 2 years. I'm here 19 months.
So Tom is not wearing a mask, and Andy is not wearing a mask.
And you know why? Because there was no BZA meeting that night. That was the only reason we started on time.
Make a motion for a resolution to move that meeting.
I thought that people who were going to come in person were going to be required to wear a mask.
We can't move their meeting. No, we can ask the council.
Yeah, you can ask the council.
Are you ready?
I'm not quite ready.
All right, let me know when you're ready.
Tom?
It's only 9 o'clock. Don't rush.
Tom, can you hear me?
So agree. You get paid for this.
We get $100 per hour going down.
Come on, Mr. Baker.
We're not ready yet, according to Mr. Vanderwood, so.
Is Mr. Baker there in person?
After running a 2-hour BZA meeting.
Yeah, that's quality, Roland. Thanks for being timely.
But I never stopped the recording.
I've been sitting there waiting for you.
Tom?
Just remember, this is a public meeting that's being broadcast publicly and recorded. Again, Brian.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, Bill, I'm ready.
All right, folks, I'm going to call this meeting of the Planning Commission for the Town of Munster for Tuesday, July 14th, 2020 to order. Please set your phones on stun. Let's all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Vanderwood, roll call, please.
Councilor Kulturitis. Present. Councilor Gardner.
Present.
Councilor Tulowitzki.
Present.
Stuart Freeman,
Present.
Roland Raffin,
Present.
Brian Specht,
Present.
Chairman Baker.
Here. All right, we got a quorum. Next up is approval of minutes. We need a motion to approve the minutes from June 9th, 2020. Any changes, modifications, what say you?
Mr. Chairman, I've reviewed the minutes and I find them acceptable, so I would move to accept them.
Second. There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Be there now. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? They're in there. Next up, preliminary hearings, to which there are none. Next is the public hearings. First up is PC docket 20-003, Maple Leaf Crossing LLC, requesting approval of the Maple Leaf Crossing planned unit development. Mr. Vanderwood.
Thank you. This is a continued public hearing from June. And the proposal tonight is to...
Tom, you have to speak up louder. I can't hear you.
This is a continued public hearing. It's for a zoning amendment to establish a planned unit development called Maple Leaf Crossing LLC. The location is 9450 Calumet Avenue. There are a number of attachments that have been provided for your review in the staff report. I'll just outline exactly what is being requested tonight. Okay, so the action that's being requested is on the screen here, and it's a recommendation to the town council to approve the Maple Leaf Crossing planned unit development. The components of that planned unit development are: one, a new set of development standards. So that is essentially the zoning standards for the document, for the district. Two, a phasing plan, and three, site engineering. Those are the components of the planned unit development. The exhibits that have been provided for you are, they don't line up totally with that, but what they are is an ordinance, which will be brought to the town council. Exhibit, which references some exhibits. Exhibit A is a development plan. That's the engineering plans that have been prepared by Torringa Engineering. Those are included in the packet. Exhibit B, development requirements. Those are the development standards for the district. That's the text document that outlines all the standards for building height, landscaping, building materials, and those types of things. And then there is Exhibit C, which is a landscaping plan that is referenced in the development requirements. So there's no section in the development requirements that talks about landscaping. It just references a landscaping plan. So that's why it's in here. The proposal, as you can see, I'm going to scroll down a little bit to the actual documents, the development plan here. Just bear with me a second. This is the engineering plan, or the set of engineering plans for the development. You will see that you've seen this a few times before. A few months ago, you approved a conceptual plan for the development, and you also approved conditionally a subdivision. So a one-lot subdivision, a preliminary plat for that subdivision. This plan as presented tonight is substantially the same as what was approved before. As you can see, there are two phases. The first phase is the north half of the property, which is a new road coming off of Calumet Avenue called Maple Leaf Boulevard. Two buildings, a 4-story office building and a 4-story hotel. You can see here there's a line that kind of cuts through the middle here, phase 1 and phase 2. Phase 2 consists of a restaurant out on Calumet Avenue, office buildings along the south, a pub, and then kind of the heart of the development, which is what I think everyone is really eager to see, is this container architecture. It's kind of like a square, like a public square in the middle of the development. So phase 1 is here, phase 2 is to the south. As I said, this was, essentially the same as the concept plan that was approved. There's also a 10-foot bike path that extends along the north side of the property and kind of extends into the development here. It kind of terminates here, becomes a sidewalk along here. This will be a connection on the Pensy Greenway. So there's a connection going through Centennial Village, coming down Calumet Avenue, crossing here, and then extending along the old railroad right away. Let me see here. So in addition to this kind of plan here that shows the engineering, this has been reviewed by our town engineer with, she has provided some comments which are listed in the report, but essentially it does meet all of our standards in terms of drainage and stormwater and basic engineering ideas. In addition to, like I said, that's Exhibit A. There's also this Exhibit B, which sort of augments that site plan. Let me scroll down here so you can see it, which again was included in the staff report. And this is what I alluded to as kind of like the zoning standards. So these are sort of the text requirements for the district. There's a list of permitted uses, which kind of tracks with, with our commercial corridor. So there's nothing really controversial in any way about that. There are use conditions and restrictions. It's a carryover from the former PUD, basically just says any hours are permitted. And then there are some kind of bulk standards, yards, height regulations. Those are one item that's a little bit unusual is the height regulation in the district will be 4 stories, which would be similar to our CD4 district, but they're asking for a maximum height of 60 feet, which would be 10 feet greater than a CD4 district. So that's just something to keep in mind. A lot of the standards in this are referencing back to both the landscaping plan and those engineering plans. So you'll see in here, for example, yards, roadways, walkways, parking, green space, etc., shall be as set forth in the approved development plan. That's the engineering plan. So rather than reiterate what's shown in graphic form, they're just referencing that graphic. I can go through this if you want, but you've all had time, I think, to review it. There are building material standards that are actually a little bit more restrictive than our current building material standards in our zoning ordinance.
But they still have to come back for each building, or are these first 2 buildings in phase 1 being handled right now as far as building materials?
So the approval tonight would just be for the documents which are here. When a building is built, they'll have to come back and get what's called a development plan approval.
Right. So before they start the buildings, they're coming back.
Right. So these are the rules, and we're going to approve the rules tonight. Or the request is to approve the rules tonight.
Right. For a favorable recommendation or a non-favorable recommendation.
Right. And then when the buildings are being proposed, they'll come in, and the plan commission will say, okay, does this follow the rules that we approved? And if it does, then you can approve it. If it doesn't, then you have a basis to deny it. But yeah, this is kind of setting the ground rules for the development. And then that's a good point. So, and then the final exhibit here that's presented is a landscaping plan. It's kind of difficult to see on the screen, but it's a standard what we would see, a normal landscaping plan prepared by a landscape architect. So again, there's no additional standards for landscaping or anything like that. They're just referencing this plan. So whatever you approve with this plan is basically all you would see in the future for landscaping. And then I've also attached the traffic and parking plan that was generated before the last meeting, so that everyone could take another look at it. Again, that's not part of the submittal, but it is a bit of, there's been some questions about, is the parking going to be sufficient and that sort of thing. And this is the plan that they've kind of provided. We've reviewed it. As I said at the last meeting, I find that it, it does meet our standard for parking, and I know that's been a concern. So that being said, I'm just going to go back to the staff report. I, along with town manager and town attorney, have reviewed all of these documents, and essentially the development standards, that text document that we looked at, is being forwarded to you with a recommendation to approve, or to forward a positive recommendation. I have provided some analysis in here. I'll just note that there are some revisions to the plans that we are suggesting happen prior to final approval. And those are listed here. And there's some landscaping items that need to be addressed, in our opinion, and some lighting and some engineering issues that kind of have to be sorted out before the final plans can be approved. What I've done here is, I can go through them one by one if you'd like. I trust you all reviewed them, but essentially what I've done is I've reviewed the landscaping and the lighting and some of the aspects of the site plan according to our codes, the minimum standards in our codes. So the recommendations that I have here are simply recommendations to meet those minimum standards that are outlined in the code.
Can I make a suggestion? Is the petitioner or is Maple Leaf aware of this analysis?
Yes.
Would it be wise, while we're going through the analysis, to have them be able to respond and us to ask questions so we can, move this along? Or again, I'm just thinking efficiency.
I would, if you want them to respond to it, you're welcome to.
Or do we want time to go through all this one time and then have the petitioner come back up here?
No, I want to know whether or not the petitioner wants to speak. If you all want to speak as the petitioner now, that would be something I'd be interested in. Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes. All right, so before we go through Tom's whole thing, I'd like to hear from them first. So Tom, are you pretty much done with the executive summary first as it relates to what's going on here? Before we go one by one and what kind of fence they're putting up?
Yep.
Yes. All right, the petitioner, please come up and state your name and address and have at it, please.
Jay Leeser, 10342 Rosewood Lane, and I'm the petitioner, but I'm going to have David Beach speak and answer those points, as he's been pointing back and forth on all those points and notes that are there.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions for the petitioner before we just go do the blocking and tackling? And I can't see any of that at all.
I'm sorry.
Does anybody want to have any questions for the petitioner before we go at it?
You're asking from the board?
Yeah.
They're all unmuted, so they can speak up if they have a question.
Not for me.
No question.
I'm good, Billy.
All right.
David Beach is going to speak.
All right, so you went through all this stuff. They've seen all of the analysis that you provided. Are you saying, Tom, that the analysis and the things that you brought up from the staff perspective is not in the drawings that was submitted in the package?
So the staff comments that were given to them, we had a conference call last week to discuss them all, and they haven't revised their plans since.
Did they agree to the requests?
They were not. I'm not sure. They seemed a little non-committal to the request. So I don't know if their intent tonight is to say yes, we're going to comply, or they have something else to say.
Okay. All right, well, I'm going to start then. I mean, as far as the site plan in and of itself, a couple of things that I had a question on, and it had to do with, first was stormwater. I was looking at the stormwater plan, and I'm assuming phase one is going to be what comes out of the ground first, because it's phase one. So those are the two big buildings. To the north of them, I couldn't see any catch basins in the parking lot as it pertains to stormwater. So I looked quite extensively and have seen these before, but I don't see where catch basins are. So I don't know if that's an engineering thing, if it's all sloping to the ditch. I don't know what that was, but I thought that was something that should get pointed out. Also, with regard to the landscaping requirements along Calumet Avenue, are there NIPSCO high tension wire or high wires there? And if there are, why are we putting trees underneath them? So just like we heard before, and I've had to do this in some of my projects, it's great because it meets all of the parameters, but then they grow into the things and they get lopped off, and it's just awful looking. So has that been taken into consideration?
Yeah, so the first question, actually Jill DiTomaso, our town engineer, is on the line. I'm gonna but she's unmuted.
I just unmuted myself, yep. There are stormwater structures along the north side of the north parking lot section. I think you might need to look at the grading plan. There's like a grading and stormwater plan that shows.
Keep going.
Well, I looked at
Stop right there.
But the sanitary sewer and water main plan should have all those structures, and I didn't see any of those structures, which is a catch basin inlet. I guess, Jill, is that my question? Is that where the stormwater, when it rains 7 inches in 2 hours, is that where they go into a catch basin inlet?
So the utility plan shows the water and sanitary sewer, but the stormwater structures and pipes are usually shown on the grading plan because the grading plan is showing the way that the land is being sloped. And we like to look at both of those together to make sure that the parking lot is sloping to the structures. So the storm structures are shown on the grading plan, which Tom has on his screen here. And so there's a line on, I'm sorry?
They're there.
They're there, yep.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, and with respect to the question of, the trees along the utility lines, yeah, we have a list of trees that are suitable for planting under utility lines. So that's an easily solved problem.
Thank you. And then the other question I had is a part of approving the rules for the PUD, does that get into monument signage and development signage as well?
Yes, in a sense, because those development standards have a section on signage, and section on signage states they will comply with our current sign ordinance.
So when do we see that?
So that would be at some point brought forth, either in conjunction with a building that has signage, or if there was a desire at some point to add signage to the site in some way, entry or gateway signage.
Right, at the light that says Maple Leaf, is there a monument sign that's going to go in? I would think that the council would want to see that before they do an approval.
Something like that would have to come in because it's not included here as an amendment to the PUD.
Okay, that's it for me. Anybody else have some questions?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
When I'm looking at some of the development or standards, when I look at, just want to get clarification, when you say theater or performing arts venue, that's when I say that's like acting theater and not a movie theater, I would assume?
That's correct.
Okay. And then when you go to the developmental standards regarding the materials, can we list things like quick brick and block as prohibited, as we want to use kind of face brick higher end products and just like a split face block and like a quick brick? That would be under prohibited materials.
Are those things, Roland, that were in like Lake Business Center and Centennial Village? I mean,
More Centennial Village and probably Lake Business Center, because we kind of had a higher standards, I think, when it came to building materials listed in Centennial Village. But I know it has to come in front of us anyways for developmental plan review. I just want developers that might want to, or any kind of people that want to build a building in here, whether a lot gets spun off, that they know what the prohibited materials are.
They're going to waive this document when they come in with the building saying this is what you said we could do. So.
Right, so I like to put a quick brick in there as prohibited, as well as any kind of block material, whether it be a painted block or a split face block in prohibited materials in Exhibit B.
Do you allow those, Tom, in Centennial Village or Lake Business Center?
I'm not familiar with quick brick, so I couldn't say. I know
It's a block that they make look like a brick. Remember, Mr. Kimmel tried to propose it for his buildings over at his outlet buildings that he's building now on his last design when he went to solid masonry instead of brick veneer.
Yeah, so Roland, I'll just point out that what I have here on the screen is a list of permitted materials. I guess I would ask our attorney, one or both, who are present here, whether or not simply not having it listed as a permitted material is a de facto prohibition, or is the language here in this permitted materials not sufficiently detailed for you?
I think he wants to add it to section 10. Go further down.
Section 10.
If you roll down a little more, go down another page, go to 10.
There you go.
There's a prohibited material section.
Okay.
And obviously, they're not on the approved list, but they're also not on the disapproved list.
Right.
We just want to say that.
Okay.
And it's pretty simple to add block, split face block, and quick brick materials.
Was there anything else you had, Roland?
That was all.
Go ahead, Councilor. Question for Mr. Beach regarding traffic. Are you able, with regards to traffic study, that hasn't been completed yet, we understand, because of, Calumet Avenue and construction. Are you able to guarantee that that will be done before construction starts, the traffic study and that issue that's been addressed by staff?
I believe that is part of the agreement we signed with the town. We are swapping an acre, which will become Maple Leaf Boulevard for the back acre. That was something that we entered into previously. And the agreement we have with the town is that will be done within 24 months of the closing of that agreement. We're waiting for the title work to be done so we can close that agreement.
But you're talking about the traffic study in Calumet Avenue,
The
right?
traffic study on Calumet Avenue, so we can prepare the traffic light intersection at Maple Leaf Cross or Maple Leaf
Yes,
Drive.
as part of that agreement that we've already signed, we took on the design and construction of the traffic light at the intersection to be done within 24 months of closing of that. I don't believe it was the intention to have the traffic light in place before we started construction of the building.
And that's also my understanding is that that would happen after 45th was completed. So when's that going to be done?
Yeah, hurry up. Okay. I guess my concern is that before we open up the buildings though, or we need, again, the length of the traffic light to be installed, engineered and installed, we need to make sure that that is before you start opening up buildings.
Right.
Or even, I'm kind of concerned even about construction traffic coming into the site.
I think the schedule plan was that would be done before any occupancy permits are issued for any of the buildings, but we would have construction ongoing. 45th Street has to finish, and then we have to do a traffic study, and then we can have the light designed. But if we put off starting construction until we can get that done, we're going to be moved back probably another year.
The 24 months that you talk about, has that 24 months been started?
No, we've been waiting to close on the acre with the town, and they have to get the title work done.
I'm assuming it has to be done within 24 months, but if your timeline moves up, you're gonna have it done before then.
I mean, yes, our intention is to have the light in place before we have any occupants in the new site.
Cool. Anybody else?
Nope.
Yeah, this is Steve Tulowitzki. A couple of questions. First one is in the formula business regulations. I think it's just really a question about the language in there. It seems sort of vague to me, and I'm not sure how we would enforce it. I think it's on page 2, Tom. There under point 2, over concentration. Point 3 says balance mixed. 4 says appropriate balance of local, regional, national. 6 is appropriate balance of small, medium, large. It was just my curiosity of how is that measured or how is that enforceable, and is this a normal way to state it since I'm new to this?
That language, I believe, is a carryover directly from the existing PUD ordinance. That's not something that we have to do for this.
And is there any opinion of staff on that language?
I would echo what Mr. Beach has said, is that was carried over from that previous ordinance. The intent of that is, as best I can gather, is to essentially eliminate chain restaurants. Not restaurants, but chain businesses and franchises. And so there's kind of a list of findings there, and it's kind of a way for the Plan Commission or the Board of Zoning Appeals actually, to sort of guide their thinking and help them think about what they should be looking for when they decide whether or not to issue that special use permit. So it's kind of establishing a framework for making that decision. And yes, it's clearly not, a completely objective, measurable type of set of criteria, but that's not necessary. I don't think that's necessary, and state statutes provide, for special use criteria that's not totally measurable.
Okay, so it's simply guidance for us on the things that should be considered as the uses are put in. Is that proper understanding?
Yes.
Okay. Next question I had there was, I think on page 5, it said the Maple Leaf Boulevard right away, and this just to understand what is meant by this in the staff notes, is wide enough to accommodate only 3 traffic lanes, constraining future intersection. What's meant by that, Tom?
What I'm saying is that road, as we had discussed at a previous meetings, is built to the limits of the right of way. Okay, so this is what you see on your screen here.
Yeah.
This is the extent of the road, and it's the extent of the right of way. So there's no additional right of way being provided for any additional lane, any kind of turn lane or anything like that. So that's just the extent. It's been built out. That's what I'm saying. Regardless of the outcome of that traffic study, the road is constrained to this per the plat and per the PUD.
There's no building to the north of that there, so that's Pepsi's land. So if push comes to shove, there's some vacant land there though, right?
There is vacant land here. There's land.
So, I mean, it's the point's though at the intersection. That's where the concern is, right? That's why it's in the staff report?
Sure. I mean, there's always a possibility to purchase or acquire more property.
Okay. And then the other thing I had picked up on was there's a comment about biking infrastructure and something that wasn't addressed around westbound cyclists being in danger. Just wanted to hear what the implication of that was.
This is recounted in the minutes from the last meeting, but essentially there was a comment from a resident stating that the location of the bike trail here along the south edge of Maple Leaf Boulevard would be dangerous for cyclists because as vehicles would exit the development onto Maple Leaf Boulevard, turning right, they would look over their left shoulder, check to see that nothing was coming from this direction, and then start driving out. And not necessarily check to make sure that there's not a cyclist, you know, traveling this way into the intersection.
Or put a stop sign for the bicyclist.
Yes, signage or something along those lines. Okay. Those were my questions. Thank you.
It's all walkable, we get it. All right, anything else?
Mr. Beach, can you address the lighting? Do you have some pictures of what type of lighting we should be looking at?
Yes, we have some pictures on the flash drive here.
So are you looking, Councilman, for lighting as it relates to on the building, side lighting, parking lot lamps, entrance?
There's questions, and because of there's no pictures or design, you know, what's the lights are going to look like?
Right. All lights.
Yeah, just to see what the lights from the street lights and also the interior lights would look like.
Because Maple Leaf, the drive is going to be a town drive, right? So we're going to have a regular town street lights on that, I would assume. Or we could do it like, you know, Ridge Road and have all kind of lights and just make it a runway. Right, Brian? All right.
So
Right,
for the
Yeah,
interior.
can I just, hold on a second. Do the members of the plan commission that are watching via Zoom, do you see a light in front of the tree right now?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, go ahead.
So for the interior of the development, we'd have the acorn style light, which would be within the walking within the interior of the development. Along the exterior of the development and along the roadways, you'd have more of a typical street light, similar to what you have here over in Southwood, which gives you the downward facing light and the brightness that we need along the paths in the exterior of the development.
Thank you.
And this one is
Oh,
picture.
that's of the existing other side. Those two, I think, are the ones, first and the second one, that relate to what we're doing on the perimeter and the interior.
The only other question I have is with regards to the engineering. There was discussion about the angled parking that's on the southernmost part of the development. That in the staff report says that it does not meet minimum standards. What have you researched with that, or have you found anything more? How do you address that issue?
We have added a sidewalk on the south side of the building that's 6.5 feet wide, which before was part of the drive and the parking. Our understanding is that the requirement is for a 13-foot drive and an 18-foot depth of a parking spot, which we have here. We've had some talk with our engineer and the town planner, and there's some uncertainty of how those are measured. It's my understanding that we meet the requirement as it has been imposed in the past. I can ask Mr. Tringa if you want to address that question. I can also tell the council that the commission, we've looked at this. What is the average size car? How is the car going to fit in here? You'll note that many of these other parking spots, 18 feet deep, have a 3-foot bumper for the tires. In the parking spot along the south edge here, there is none, so the car can pull all the way in with the wheel up against the edge of the parking spot. Your average car is 15 to 16 feet long. If you're driving an SUV, you might get up to 18 or 19, but we believe that this will fit, virtually all the cars that we'll have in there. And it's obviously significantly off the roadway. So we don't anticipate any problem with it.
Don Torrio, Torrio Engineering, I'm a design engineer. What I passed out is from, and this is just something that you can take or leave, but this is from
previous Munster ordinances. We've had this as the example of how parking is to be done for over 30 years in our office. When I looked at the new ordinances with Mr. Beach that said that 30-degree parking needed this, 60-degree parking needed this. 30-degree parking on what you're looking at is the second one down on the left-hand side. That's what the Munster ordinance said previously. You don't have a diagram of this type in your ordinances now. All you have is text. So when I saw that 30-degree parking had 18-foot deep parking spaces and 13-foot aisles, I said, oh, okay, they changed it from what it was previously. We can meet that requirement and still put a sidewalk on the other side. What we're hearing is that 60-degree parking in your ordinances is reflected on this drawing as being what I thought was 30 degree. And that's the issue. So basically, what Mr. Vanderwood is saying is that the top right example is 30 degree, and the second down on the left is 60 degree. And therein lies the dilemma. If we were to have to change our drawing to reflect, I think it's 20-foot deep parking spaces and 16-foot wide out drive aisles, that would take lot 5, lot 6, and lot 7. Everything would have to move to the north. All of the utilities, the buildings, the sidewalks, everything would have to move on this drawing. And that's why we're objecting to it. We think it's perfectly fine. There are no parking bumpers on any of those spots. To the south of this is the railroad. Trucks, cars that pull into those spots could pull up all the way to the curb. There would be no reason that they couldn't do that. They won't be infringing on anything to the south because, again, it's just grass. So
The reason why I asked is in March or May, we approved the site plan without that sidewalk. So what I want to approve tonight is something that's going to work. So I guess I would ask Tom, are you comfortable in your calculations that that parking is not, it's going to cause us problems in the future?
I would just say that, yeah, the parking minimum standards that we have now are actually a little bit less than what we had in the past. So as Don described, our old 30-degree parking, which required 22 feet plus 15 feet, we actually require less, but we still have minimum requirements. So I would not suggest that we waive those minimum standards for the dimensions of parking spaces.
Is the only issue with this parking question along the south end where the railroad tracks are, where everybody's going to loop around the entire place to get to it to park next to the dumpster?
Yeah, that's the only area where they don't have the minimum spacing.
I would like to add one more thing if I could.
Sure.
When you look at the 30-degree example, which is again the second one down on the left, previously it stated that the depth of those spaces needed to be 22 feet. And the width of those spaces needed to be 10. Your current ordinance states that they need to be 9 feet minimum wide and 18 feet deep. Mr. Vanderwood is looking at it and he's saying that's not correct. The 22 feet actually needs to be 20 feet and not 18. And the 18 feet is, if you look underneath the word degree, where it shows 20, he's saying that's the 18 feet. So that also poses a problem because that's 2 more feet that we have to come up with somewhere on the site. Very technical.
It is technical. I'm just going to say that we don't have a very onerous parking requirements. I don't think it's too much to ask them to meet it.
Other than the fact that, I'm sorry for that.
All right, so, I mean, we're talking about a PUD, so this has created its own rules anyway, so we could take that into consideration, and or if people have a challenge with that portion of the development creating havoc, then we'll bump it up to the council, they can deal with it. But I personally think for those parking spaces, they're primarily gonna be, I would say, for employees and any kind of overflow we got into it. So whether it's 18, 20, or 22, just stay between the lines and everybody should be okay. That would be my take.
I agree with you, Mr. Baker.
All right, what else we want to talk about? When's the fencing have to go up along Calumet Avenue? Is there a requirement to be consistent throughout town with that, Tom? Or is that something that the developer gets to pick on the PUD? So when we go from Lake Business Center to Pepsi to Maple Leaf, we're going to see a cornucopia of fencing product.
We don't have a standard. We have some, as far as like a standard template for what the fence should look like. We just have a standard that it be an ornamental wrought iron style fence.
Well, the developer is local. Hopefully they'll realize as you drive down the street, it'd be nice to have something that looks consistent. Nice, so that would be something that point out. Is that something that has to be done at the end, or is that something that you're requiring as they come in for each individual building? Phase 1, phase 2, would it happen phase 1, phase 2?
Phase 1 and phase 2.
All right, so as soon as they pull a permit, that's gonna start for phase 1, and then everything that's on the rule sheet, like you said, is gonna be applicable for phase 1.
Everything north of that line.
Thank you. Anybody else? This is all about passing the rules here so we can give this as a recommendation to the council for the PUD. Talk to me, people, so we're not here till 11 o'clock.
I'm good.
Okay, motions are good. Something is good. Anything?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion as presented with those couple of corrections I noted regarding the building materials earlier.
Second.
Anyone else want to add something to the motion?
I second it.
All right, so there's a motion and a second. Mr. Vanderwood, did you understand what that motion was?
It appears to me that the motion is to approve the plan as presented, with the exception of a modification to the building material standards. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So just to clarify, none of the staff comments that were in the staff report.
Let me just.
Any of those be.
Hold on, my computer just froze. Hold on.
So, Mr. Rappin, the question was for your motion, were any of the suggestions that were on the staff report relating to the numerous items here, were those included or excluded in your motion?
Well, I thought the parking standards were fine, in my opinion, after building as many parking lots as I have done in the past. Let's see, I'm looking over. Let me go over the condition. Hold on. We already did the phasing plan, which I was fine with. The site engineering I was fine with, as well as the use of restrictions that we talked about as the developmental agreement I was fine with.
What I'm asking, Roland, is there were a number of items in the staff report outlining where the plans did not meet our minimum standards. I just want to make sure that you're asking whether or not you're.
Well, when it comes to lighting and all that kind of stuff, we should meet the town code minimum standards, of course. That should be a given regarding lighting or anything else.
But I think what I'm saying is that it doesn't. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm saying the plans as presented here don't. The reason those comments are in the staff report is because the plans as presented don't meet those minimum standards. So I just want to clarify.
Tom, I would make the clarification that the minimum standards per our town ordinance should be met.
Well, I mean, in having a defined overview is going to be stuff, and what you're looking for is what I'm hearing is you're looking for a line by line approval of all this stuff. Is that what you're trying to get to at 10 o'clock?
I don't need a line by line. I think if you say the minimum standards, that would cover it because all the comments are related to the
I mean, because there's stuff in here about, you know, chain link fence. I mean, they're not putting chain link fence up, are they?
The plans show a new chain link fence.
I mean, well, that where? Not along Calumet Avenue, next to the truck traffic?
And that would never get approved anyways on a developmental standard review regarding the building when you break them down.
So, I mean, if they're in there, we could always hold up the building.
What I'm saying is those comments relate to the site, which is being approved tonight, not to the buildings. The buildings will be subject to all those, a separate approval through the development plan process. But all the comments that I have relate to the site.
And Tom, we'll also look at these buildings when it comes to obviously landscaping on each building, you know, building materials when it comes to the developmental site plan review, correct?
That's correct, and that'll be governed by those development requirements.
Which are the minimum standards that we have set through our zoning ordinance.
What I'm suggesting is that the site work and all the landscaping, the lighting, and so on, there will be no separate approval for that. So if there are any standards, minimum standards that you want them to meet, we have to make that clear tonight as part of this approval or this recommendation.
Tom, I'll adjust my motion to meet the minimum
Hold
standard.
on a second, Roland, because this is a public hearing, right? Before we do a motion, do we have to?
Oh, okay. You're absolutely right.
It's a continued public hearing.
It is.
What does that, I mean?
Oh, that was, yeah, we had a public hearing last month, by the way.
3 straight meetings. At what point?
Hey, does anybody in here want to talk about this? I can open it, now I close it, so now I'm done. So I got this Robert Rules guy in my head telling me what I have to do here. All right, so we're done with the public hearing. Go ahead, Roland.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve as presented with the caveat that the minimum town standards as presented are met as the development progresses. As outlined in today's document.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Beach.
This is a PUD.
It is.
We have spent months going through to put together these standards, and they don't meet all of the CD4A. If it was a CD4A, we wouldn't be doing it as a PUD. But for instance, the lighting, it does not match a CD4A, but we have gone through and revised to make sure that there's adequate lighting. You have a lighting plan in here you can look at, I believe it's page 6 of the engineering drawings, to demonstrate you have 1 foot candle of light throughout the entirety of the development. And we did that by using the light fixtures that we've shown. That does not meet the code that you have. And we've been back and forth. I think we're on our 3rd or 4th light plan now. But to now go back and reincorporate the code into the PUD kind of emasculates the entire purpose of the PUD to begin with.
Oh, I agree
We will be
with that.
back here next month doing the same thing again, if we're gonna say, subject to meeting all the code.
Mr. Chairman, I have a comment that may be helpful.
Go ahead, Councilman.
Thank you. I noticed Tom, in your staff notes, there was a recommended motion, which may cover the fact that we're not reverting back to minimum standards or the code, but rather this PUD. And that was, I'll just read the motion in case, Roland, you'd like to adopt this.
Well, we get that. You don't need to read it, Councilman. We have it all written down. So, I mean, that's a good suggestion as it relates to trying to meet that requirement. The town attorney would like to say something. Mr. Westland, could you come to the podium if you'd like to speak, please? Evidently, you've been working on this as well, huh?
Well, I've been working on it since, well, about 1.5 years, right? Like the former council and now this council. And, you know, you're right, Mr. Baker, when you say this is a PUD. So you're starting with a blank slate, right? I don't think Mr. Raffin's motion was to just simply say, well, follow CD4, because then why would we be here on a PUD? Why would we spend all this time doing all the things we've been doing? And I think what this comes down to is your staff has made recommendations with regard to different areas, like the parking, which you already discussed, but the landscaping, the light plan. And what I've heard, and I've spent multiple calls with both our staff and the developer, there are certain certain items here that the developer is saying to you, I can't meet right now, that are contained as recommendations in the staff report. So really what it comes down to is whether or not the plan commission, is going to adopt, if you adopt the staff report, they're saying they can't do it. Verbatim of what's in here in the staff report. They're telling you why. And if you have a question about the specific landscaping, I know Mr. Baker brought up the tree canopy along Calumet Avenue as an example, right? If I got overhead lines, whether I cut them or not, on the call that I was on, the developer was saying, listen, I don't want to make that tree canopy because you're going to have all kinds of problems. And that's just one example.
So what they're saying, Mr. Westland, is that this is what the staff is saying doesn't meet the commercial requirements. What the developer's saying is what's in the drawings that we're looking at.
That's right. Okay. And so really your decision is with regard to looking at the staff report's recommendations and saying yes or no, and then making a motion. And I appreciate Roland's motion, but it adopts all the standards, which I'm not really sure where that puts us.
The same place we've been the last 2 months.
Right, and in circles, I think is what you said last
Yeah, something like that.
So,
At 10 o'clock.
So, I would ask you to take a look at the staff recommendations and decide, if there's something in the landscaping that, you want to include, I would ask the developer point blank, can you do this or not? And if not, why not? If there's something in the light plan that you're angst up about, ask them that. And we've already talked about these engineering issues, but I think your motion tonight, needs to be to send a recommendation to the council. I would add to the what's in here, but to approve a recommendation with regard to the ordinance also. But, you had preliminary plat approval in May, and it was conditioned on the staff report. Now you have the staff report, so you need to decide what part of the staff report, if any, the developer is going to meet going forward, so that when either that or just punt the thing for another month, right? I mean, that's the other alternative, because what I hear the developer saying is we want to walk out of here tonight, and they haven't been able to thus far, with knowing exactly what we have to do. And right now, with the way, and I understand, I read the minutes and I actually watched those meetings. Previously, the developer has not been able to move dirt. The project hasn't moved because he can't, with it being contingent on something that is yet to come or whatever, he can't go out to bid and start spending money on this project. It's a $30 to $40 million investment that the town, starting with the previous town council and now this town council, has a vested interest in moving forward. So, I would urge you to kind of drill down into what's important. I think the traffic study is important. I think the design of that light's important. I think having that light functioning by the time they get an occupancy permit is important. Those are objective things that you can make as conditions that are recommended here as part of the motion that I think you should look at. But the other parts of this report, you really need to decide, what do we want? Do we care, for instance, what the bike rack is made out of? Because that's one of the conditions in the report. So if you care, then you need to make that a condition. If you don't care whether that bike rack is aluminum or wrought iron or whatever, then that's your decision.
Got it. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I'm going to pull my motion. Can you go back to the staff report? Can we just go through each one and vote on it, like Mr. Westland said, what we care about, what we don't? Can you go back to the start with page 3 of the staff report, and we'll go through it each item by item, and maybe we could bring a consensus vote on each thing so we can move along on this?
Page 5. I mean, is there something, I don't want to go line by line with everybody. We'll be here till, Friday. So, I mean, is there something specific that you, in having reviewed all of these documents, members of the commission, that you have challenges with as it pertains to what's on the drawings versus the staff, of which their requests are, which kind of meet those parameters that everybody's worked on? And I think that might be able to help it. So Go from there. Councilman?
With regards to the traffic study, I think it should be conditioned on a traffic study design and installation commissioned by Maple Leaf, you know, to town standards prior to the occupancy of the development. So the traffic study should be as a contingency.
Before occupancy.
Before occupancy.
Anything else?
And the traffic. We're talking about the traffic.
Traffic light, yeah, traffic lights.
Mr. Chairman?
The traffic light.
And the installation though. Yeah.
Traffic light study
And
and
installation.
installation. Okay, yes, sir.
I'm just curious on, can they meet the landscaping part that's in here that staff recommended? The lighting, they said they can't meet, right? Engineering,
Well, let's have them address landscaping.
Yeah, but if you could put up the landscaping plan, I can show you what we've done. And where we were, headed with it. What we have for the,
I'm not sure you'll be able to really see it in great detail.
Go ahead and talk, Mr. Beach, while he's looking for the plan.
the frontage talks about, and I'm looking at page 114 of your code, 26-6.405.A-6, 1 tree per 30 feet of non-building frontage at first lot layer is greater than 15 feet. And you'll see what we've done. There, and Rowena, obviously you can't see where I'm pointing, but along the bike path on Calumet Avenue, you have the overhead lines. And there you see we have decorative trees and shrubs. There's one row of parking, and then you have a row of shade trees that are along the sidewalk in the green space adjacent to the 10-foot sidewalk in front of the 4-story building, the restaurant, and the south building. These buildings all have frontage on Calumet Avenue, and our occupants are going to want to have some exposure to Calumet Avenue. So we've come up with what we think is a plan that has some depth to it, some character to it, and still allows for exposure for those occupants of the building. You recall, our 4-story office building also has container architecture pointing, coming out of the 2nd story of the building. You want to have that visible. We think it will be an interesting architectural piece and have some visibility of that from Calumet Avenue. So this is the plan that we came up with to have, a fully landscaped frontage, but also have exposure for the buildings.
If I can just clarify then, with respect to the standard is achievable, and it's simply, and they're demonstrating that by installing trees under the utility line. The standard is simply that a continuous canopy. And what that means is if you have shade trees which have wider canopies, typically 30 feet wide, you plant them at 30-foot wide intervals. If you have smaller trees with smaller canopies, you plant them more closely.
No, and I understand that. We've been having this conversation for years with regards to what happens along Calumet Avenue and trying to block everything, and this is a different deal. I mean, personally, I'm of the opinion that if you have the premium of being on Calumet Avenue, you don't want to be blocked by the canopy. But, I know there's others that feel that they don't want to see parking lots either. But I'm back to whether or not this plan is approvable as it's presented versus meeting additional requirements that are coming from the ordinance that we don't have a picture of yet, which means we go back and forth again. And or go through and say, add additional here, do additional that. But again, moving the program forward, I'm of the opinion that if you're going to have this type of density, and I've already commented on that, there's not much more places you can put more trees. All right, so
Mr. Chairman, if I'm looking at this drawing, Exhibit C, and Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, with the trees and the shrubs that we have down Calumet Avenue as presented by the petitioner, I mean, without scaling it all out, it looks like it's pretty close to meeting our ordinance. Is that correct?
I would say it's about halfway there.
And okay, what do you think it's lacking that I'm missing?
It's the shape, it's the ornamental trees planted along the east edge of the parking lot. At an interval equal to their mature canopy, which is, I believe, to be somewhere between the 15 and 20-foot range.
All right.
And where are you planting it now?
And so we
Well,
have.
Mr. Beach, if we had to pull a few of those trees in as we're going through developmental standard review, that's not holding you up from doing parking lots and parking lot lighting and everything else. That's as you're going to develop some of these buildings and property plan by plan, correct?
A single tree is not going to hold us up, that's true. Our concern is if you have a 15-foot tall tree, you're going to have foliage from about 5 feet to 15 feet. And if you have the canopies growing together from 5 to 15 feet, and then you've got a fence that's 3.5 feet, you've created, in effect, a wall along Calumet Avenue that completely shields the development from Calumet Avenue. This is frontage for the office, for the restaurant, and for the south office. So we want to have some visibility from Calumet Avenue. Now, again, this is a PUD. That ordinance talks about a parking area. If we had a parking lot that went rows deep, I could understand why you'd want to have that green wall along Calumet Avenue. What we've done here is put one row of parking with heavy landscaping on both sides of it, but still something that allows for visibility of the buildings from Calumet Avenue. And it is not what you would have if you had a large parking lot, but that's why you have the PUD ordinance.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask Mr. Westland a question? You bet. Mr. Westland, as the attorney for the town council, I know you worked closely on this. Is the town council, because they have been the driving force behind this, are they satisfied with what the developer is presenting at this time?
Well, you got 3 of them here, right? Like, so you want me to answer?
Yeah.
I'm fine with the trees along Calumet Avenue, the way they presented in this plan. With the space in between the ornamental trees on Calumet Avenue and then the second row, the shade trees. So I'm pleased and fine with the way the landscaping is right here.
Let me answer something this way though, Mr. Speck. You know, you have a developer that is investing millions and millions of dollars, right? And is getting an incentive from the town. But the incentive they get is on the back end of what they do. So the more they put in and the better the development is, the better their incentive is. This is not like incentives we've done in the past in this town, right? And that's a big distinction. We didn't write them a big check up front like we've done before. We kind of learned our lesson there. And it's a eat what you kill or whatever you want to call it. And so I think when a developer is basically putting their money where their mouth is, to some extent, I personally would be shocked if Mr. Leeser was going to have a schlocky looking landscape plan, because it all goes into the higher this thing's assessed, the more property taxes he pays, and his tenants will pay through CAM, which will then get funneled through the town's property taxes, which then pays his incentive. He doesn't get his incentive unless he drives that value north. So
That'd have been nice to know about 2.5 years ago.
As we've, Mr. Baker, as we've talked about this for several months and several meetings, I've said, what do we have to do where Mr. Leeser can walk in the next morning and get a permit and start moving dirt? And I've consistently been told that if you make this motion, it'll happen, and it hasn't happened. So I am making a motion that we approve the plans as submitted, with the exception of that, what Mr. Gardner said, that they have to have the traffic study and the light installed prior to occupancy. And I will make that motion.
There's a motion, is there a second?
Second.
A second, is there any discussion?
I just want, Mr. Baker, if I can.
Sure.
For purposes of the record, the motion is to approve the Maple Leaf Crossing Plan Unit Development and send a favorable recommendation with regard to the ordinance.
Yes.
To the town council.
Yeah.
So I can't see anything as far as anybody on this for discussion, Mr. Vanderwood. So you have to help me on that. So any other discussion here in the room? Any discussion on the Zoom to the people that are on the commission?
Yeah.
Either none, got a motion and a second, Mr. Vanderwood.
Yeah, Mr. Sprecht had asked a question with regards to the opinion of council. I'm aligned with Councilor Gardner. When I look at the trees and the canopy, not being a horticultural expert, I do think there is some people will want to see a little bit into this development. I see trees spaced after the first row of cars, and so it seems to me like the best effort has been done to do this tastefully, and I appreciate the comments from Mr. Westland and Beach. My question though is, what are the things? What is not entirely clear for me yet is, where is there real contention where the town staff wants something, and the developer says no, we can't do it. If we've addressed all of those things, that's fine. I haven't heard other additional questions from the commission, but I'm curious if there's something else from the developer that they're uncomfortable with in the staff recommendations that we might actually decide upon.
So Councilman, under discussion on the motion in a second, you're asking a question of the petitioner. Is that what I'm understanding?
No, staff.
Of staff?
Yeah, I'm just trying to clarify. I really appreciated what Mr. Westland said, that there's an ordinance brought forward, there are staff notes. The recommended motion was from staff was to implement with all the staff notes. I heard in the discussion we would not want to force the parking issue, as Mr. Toringa has described. But if we would go with that motion, then there would be problems from the developers. Now, the motion that's been made is in favor of the developer's ordinance with the addition of the lighting, the traffic study and the lighting. I'm just wondering if there's another important thing that we haven't fully discussed because we haven't seen that conflict. And that could be staff's opinion. What is the, so Tom, if we pass this ordinance, what's the thing that you're most worried about that was in your notes that we're skipping over? Because there we may be able to add some value.
I wouldn't characterize my feelings as being worried, but what I'm presenting to you is, as I said, the minimum standards of the code. These are the standards that the town plan commission recommended and the town council approved, specifically last year, as a way to, set minimum standards for developments in town. So I'm not of the opinion that there's anything in here in my comments that would dramatically change the site plan outside of the parking question. I don't think any of the landscaping or lighting standards are impossible to achieve or really would require dramatic change in the plans. So that's my concern. I think these are actually very easy to implement, very easily implementable. Again, these are the minimum standards that we require of everyone. With the PUD, yes, you do grant flexibility in service of a greater project, but I don't necessarily see how reducing, for example, the number of trees for development is in service of a greater sort of good. I can definitely see the flexibility that we've given with respect to the arrangement of the parking. We've given flexibility with respect to setbacks and those types of things. That makes a lot of sense, and I think it does serve a greater project, and I think it's a good project. But I think the comments that I provided, as I said, they're not really substantial changes. They are substantive because they speak to the aesthetic standards of the town. But that's my concern, that we're maybe just arbitrarily waiving certain things that don't need to be waived.
Mr. Chairman, I move for a vote.
Before you do that, Mr. Chairman, can I just have that motion, so we have the record completely clear? Mr. Speck's motion was to approve the Munster or the Maple Leaf Crossing PUD and send a favorable recommendation with regard to the attached ordinance to the Munster Town Council, conditioned upon the traffic study as well as the design of the intersection and the construction and having the intersection working prior to occupancy. I just want, that's what my notes reflect.
Intersection is traffic signal. I think was also specifically.
That's what I was talking about. The traffic
That's
light.
what your motion
Or
was.
traffic. It's your motion, Mr. Speck. Did I get that right?
And Dave, that goes to the council for approval.
It would, yeah, it would go,
The recommendation is
the recommendations to the council, it would go to the council either at the next meeting or the following meeting.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Discussion zone. We have a motion to vote. Let's go. Mr. Vanderwood.
Oh, I'm sorry. Counselor Kulturitis?
Yes.
Counselor Gardner?
Yes.
Counselor Tulowitzki?
Yes.
Stuart Friedman?
Yes.
Roland Rappen?
Yes.
Brian Specht?
Yes.
And Chairman Baker.
Yes. Yay. Thank you.
One housekeeping question for Mr. Wesson. Do we need to address, since the May minutes, we had approved the site plan condition on engineering drawings being reviewed? Now that they've been reviewed, do we need to accept the site plan for that docket 20-002?
I would defer to Mr. Wickland, but I would say, you know, your preliminary plat approval was conditioned upon staff review and engineering review. I think in light of the motion that was made tonight, those issues have been addressed and those are no longer conditions of the plat.
I agree. Mr. Wickland, thank you. Okay.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen, for your patience, both with Maple Leaf Crossing and to Mr. Zunica, who's up next, very patiently at PC docket number 20-007, requesting approval of a development plan for a covered patio at Danny Z's Restaurant at 1860 45th Street. Mr. Vanderwood.
1 second. I'm here.
Gentlemen, you don't want to stick around? Come on.
You stuck around for years.
I've been on the tail end of
Way past Mr. Peppermint's bedtime.
Go eat pizza later.
Mr. Westland usually turns into a pumpkin at 10 o'clock.
All right, Mr. Vanderwood, let's go.
All right, bear with me 1 second. Let me pull this other staff report up here. There's a application before you tonight for
PC docket number 20-007, and the request is a public hearing for
Approval of the development plan.
Yeah, for a development plan for a covered patio at the Danny Z's Restaurant.
I read that already.
Okay, did you? All right, so what's being proposed here is a small addition to an existing outdoor dining area at Danny Z's Restaurant, which is located right here. This is 45th Street. This is Fran Lynn. This is McShane's Pavilion on 45th Street development. Danny Z's is located here in the parking lot. They currently have a small outdoor dining area, approximately 445 square feet. They want to add to it, which is shown, the addition is shown here on this footprint, or on this site plan. They will be eliminating some parking spaces, so they'll be relocating 2 ADA spaces to the north side of the parking lot and eliminating 1. There is parking analysis provided in the staff report, which shows that there is sufficient parking on site for them to lose those.
Got it. All right.
Yeah, basically what you're reviewing here is the building materials, and just to confirm that it meets our standards, I can say as a staff person that there's no concern that it meets all the applicable standards, building materials, parking, ADA access, and those types of things. The one item that I will mention is that they received a favorable recommendation to approve a conditional use for the expansion of the outdoor dining from the Board of Zoning Appeals. Some of you were here for that. And they also received variances for their landscaping, so they're not going to be required to install any parking lot landscaping.
Got it. All right, somebody here's from the petitioner. Yes, sir. State your name for us, please.
Tom Ulo Designs, 680 North Lakeshore Drive, Chicago. The, as Tom described,
You can't flip that, can you, Tom?
I don't think.
Go ahead, sir. I'm sorry.
Turn your head, Bill.
I'm gonna fall asleep if I turn my head.
There you go. There you go. There you go. So this basically describes what the space is and how it's laid out, done by Fabric Architects. We're working with everybody locally as we dig into the inside of the building and working with all local contractors. And as we really feel that this adds to the building considerably. We're using the same awning materials we used on the north side of the building. We're changing the logo. We're changing the size of the logo and what it's made of to comply with the current signage requirements of the city. Creating a pergola over the entranceway, patio lighting hung from the ceiling under the pergola. It's the structure is basically a timber structure with the brickwork that you have samples of there as well, and you have a sample of the awning material that we're recommending.
Thank you. I had one question. I tried to look as far as the new overhang downspouts. I saw the relocation of the existing downspouts. Are you taking into consideration the water hitting the top of the new roof, and where's that downspout? I couldn't find it on the drawing.
I'm not sure. I think we have Tom Fabric on Zoom on this. I don't know if we have it included in there or it's been.
Right. Is it going to just sheet off the front? Is that the premise? Just to make sure it doesn't sheet off inside your fence.
No, it'll sheet off. The overhang of the balance is out past the stonework on the west side of the building.
Yeah, that's right. This is Tom Fabric. So the downspouts, there's no downspouts on this structure itself. The roof of the existing building is internally drained, I believe. Oh, it actually drains towards the rear.
Yeah.
I believe.
So it's just sheeting off the extension.
Right.
All right, thank you. Any other questions for the petitioner?
I have no questions.
All right, I need to do this public hearing. Considering we're the only ones in here, I consider it open. 1, 2, 3, public hearing is now closed. Back to the board.
I make a motion to approve PC docket 2007, granting approval of a development plan for a covered patio at Danny Z's Restaurant on 1860 45th Street, contingent upon town council approval of the required conditional use permit.
Second. Is there any discussion on the motion in a second? Either or none, Mr. Vanderwood.
Councilor Kulturitis?
Yes.
Councilor Gardner?
Yes.
Councilor Tulowitzki?
Yes.
Stuart Friedman?
Yes.
Roland Raffin?
Yes.
Brian Specht?
Yes.
Chairman Baker?
Yes, sir. Thank you for your patience, gentlemen. Appreciate it. Thank you. Next one up.
Sticking around for a while, guys.
Bye, guys. Nice to see you.
Take care. PC docket number 19-002, Guy Costanza, GM Contracts, requesting approval of a preliminary plat for a one-lot commercial subdivision at 407-411 Ridge Road. Mr. Vanderwood, nobody's left in the room but us.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to table this to the August meeting. And then at that time, we should look to either approve or deny it.
Is there somebody here before Roland makes the motion to speak on this behalf? I know, are you?
I'll speak during the discussion. If somebody wants to second that, it's fine.
Okay.
The motion
I'll
was
second Roland's motion.
Motion in a second.
So Dave Wickland and I have been in conversation with John Reed, who's now representing Guy Costanza. And the feeling that they have is that they haven't been able to identify a user yet. They'd rather not proceed with the preliminary plat and just come in and bring it all together with a development plan approval once they have an end user. So they're going to build it. They've got the variances now for the setback and for the parking. So they're going to seek a user with that kind of confidence that they have the reduction in parking.
So Tom, should we just make a motion to deny it, or should we table it? Or what do you do?
Withdrawal.
Hold on, Roland.
If they don't have a user in 30 days, then they're probably going to withdraw the application. So we're going to just want a 30-day deferral.
What's the record for
I cannot hear Mr. Wickland. I'm sorry.
months in a row?
I don't know, Brian, and to my knowledge, there's nothing in the ordinance or in the statute that applies. So
It's interesting.
it is.
If that's something that's a concern to the commission, we could adopt that as a rule, either as an amendment to the zoning ordinance or just as a rule of procedure.
But you could also just deny. I mean, that's an option. John's asked for a 3-day deferral.
What's the request? I guess that's why I was looking to you, is what's the request since he's not here? Was it to extend for indefinite period for 30 days? Just so we keep doing it every month?
So to be clear, they didn't submit a formal request, which is why I'm just recommending that we table it. I anticipate, as Dave said, that we will get a formal request to withdraw the petition.
So that doesn't hurt us to table it for 1 month then.
Yeah,
So do we have to set the timeline? Because if you table it for 1 month, Roland, then we're gonna have to do this again next month. So
Well, I said August meeting, we'd put it up to a vote to either accept or deny it if it's not withdrawn.
And by that time, he'll have determined.
Okay, so there's a motion and a second. Was there a second?
Yes, I second.
Oh, Councilman. Any discussion? We had that? All right, Mr. Vanderwood.
Councilor Kulturitis.
Yes.
Councilor Gardner.
Yes.
Councilor Tulowitzki.
Yes.
Stuart Friedman.
Yes.
Roland Raffin.
Yes.
Brian Speck.
Yes.
Chairman Baker.
Yes. All right. Findings of fact. PC 20-003, which is Maple Leaf Crossing requesting approval of Maple Leaf Crossing Planning and Development, which was a recommendation to council. So we have to do a findings of fact on a recommendation?
Yes.
Yes. So I need a motion so we can move through these last couple of things.
I'll make a motion.
And there's a motion to approve the findings of fact. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All right, is there any discussion? Be there none.
Mr. Chairman, are the things that we added, those extra caveats included in those findings of facts?
This is your setup, so I mean, here we go.
I mean, wouldn't the parking and the light, all those conditions we made on the motion be into that findings of fact?
I can change it.
Yeah, the findings have to be modified.
Okay.
The motion that was made. And to your question, do we need findings of fact? The answer is yes, because ultimately the council needs them as a basis for their decision as well.
So they reviewed that as the basis for their vote on our recommendation?
Yeah.
Yes, not the minutes or the video of this outstanding meeting.
They don't watch the video, right?
They don't? Okay.
There's a video.
Yeah, right here.
I'll be dreaming about it, I'm sure.
Okay,
I have no comments.
all right.
So the motion I heard was that it is to improve the findings of fact based upon what we did for 20-003. Is there another way we need to say it for Robert or any other person who makes the rules?
Sufficient with the modification of the findings.
Okay. Is that what you said, Mr. Speck?
Sure, yes.
And the second was from whom?
Me.
Andy.
I don't remember. I think I seconded it. I don't remember.
All right, Stuart did, somebody. I think Stuart did.
Okay. Councilor
left out.
Councilor Kulturitis.
Yes.
Councilor Gardner.
Yes.
Councilor Tulowitzki.
Yes.
Stuart Friedman.
Yes.
Roland Raffin.
Yes.
Brian Speck.
Yes.
Chairman Baker.
Yes, sir. Next one up, finding of fact, PC 20-007, which is Daniel Zuniga requesting the approval of development plan for the covered patio at Danny Z's Restaurant.
I make a motion that we accept that finding of fact.
There's a motion, is there a
Second.
And a second, any discussion? Either none, voice vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. Mr. Speck, you want to talk about a resolution?
I make a resolution that we either, that they start the BZA meeting at 6 or 6:30 and give us sufficient time so our meeting does not start an hour to an hour and 30 minutes late every month.
There's a motion. Is there a second? In that resolution, I would assume would go to the town council.
Second.
And a second. Any discussion on that? I mean, personally, I couldn't be more happy with that. I mean, let's see if that works out. The guys that sit on the BZA, I mean, what do you think? Roland?
It would be very difficult to have the BZA meeting start for me at 6 o'clock. I could maybe do 6:30. I would be willing to do that.
That's fine, Stuart, if you could get your meeting over in an hour instead of 2.
I'm fine with 6:30.
I mean, are we of the opinion, I mean, I'm thinking your meetings are going longer now just because of the fact that all of these new ordinances are in place. I don't see it being any shorter time frame here in the near future.
No, I don't think it's any shorter, no, and I'm sorry that it's happening this way, but.
So, and then is there always is it another thing that's the status quo, it has to be on the same day? Is that just for you? I mean, you're already worn thin already. I mean, why would you want to have 2 meetings in a row?
I adhere to the schedule, but,
I mean, what's the benefit from having, I mean, the BZA would have to be first. Does that have any impact on it, on which one is first in a month?
Well, don't forget some of the business on BZA also goes to the same PC Plan Commission afterwards. Like,
Yeah, I think it makes sense to have it the same day.
Well, and that, I understand that. I mean, there's going to be a debate about it, but also, I mean, we've been pretty consistent in not wrapping our meetings up at 10:30. The BZA guys, you talk for, a half an hour and everything are in bed already.
Yeah. The only other comment I would make is we often have important public hearings that happen, and it's like tonight, difficult for residents to show up and wait until sometimes 11 o'clock or 10 o'clock. So moving it earlier is great. If it is on another day, there's pros and cons with that, but I would agree doing something would be good, not only for us, but for people who want to show up and remonstrate.
I would have a hard time with scheduling kids trying to find a second night to do it. Honestly, I'd rather knock it out in one night for my $50 a night.
benefits to applicants such as Danny Z for having it on a single night as well.
Yeah.
They get to have both hearings.
I think trying to start it.
Why don't we try it at 6:30 and see what happens?
Now, we did move some of the stuff. We're trying to get rid of some of these simpler items. We're not having a preliminary hearing and a public hearing. So we're trying to limit the amount of meetings coming into the BZA.
Very good. All right, so we have a resolution. I mean, we have a motion in the second. True? You have it?
Sounds like the resolution is to ask if you can change the BZA meeting to 6:30.
That's correct.
To bump up the begin date and the begin time.
The one thing I would say is I'd ask the other members of the BZA if they're able to make it.
Well, making a resolution tonight doesn't really mean anything. It's asking the council, so we have to do it anyway. So let's approve the resolution and let's go to the next step.
Got it. There's a motion and a second discussion we had. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None? It's out there.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes?
I'll make a motion to
Can I ask one thing? I got one other item.
Sure.
We have a proposal now. You may recall that I tried to schedule a special work study to talk about the Lansing Country Club. They withdrew the original concept that they had, which was kind of like a mixed use residential and commercial development. And now what they're trying to do is just purely commercial, like medical office type of stuff. But they want to really sit down and talk through the concept with the planning commission before they have a formal,
They don't want to file an application, they want to have a meeting.
Right, and they want to kind of do an overview of the whole.
I thought we couldn't meet all together without it being a formal meeting.
You can have a study session.
Study session?
But it's got to be open to the public, that's the only kicker.
Okay.
That's the way it goes.
Like at Centennial Park.
It could just be here.
Like at the NEC.
On the patio.
Supporting everything.
All right, so what I was hoping to do is have everyone take out their phones and see if we can just schedule a date for that meeting.
1 second.
If everyone can do that, or should I just?
What are our options?
Did they give us any dates at all?
They didn't give us any dates, but I think they have availability. So.
Are you looking at an evening or a day?
It would be an evening meeting.
7 o'clock?
Or 6:30, I don't know.
6:30. I don't have a problem starting at 7 or 7:30 or 6:30. I just have a problem starting the meeting on time. Yeah. I mean, and when you're wasting people's time, when we have to start a meeting at 7:30, we have to show up at 7:30. We don't know when the BZA's meeting is going to be over. Mr. Leeser, Mr. Beach, Mr. Westland, we're all standing out there. There's a lot of money that are just wasting for 2 hours where we waiting for the meeting to start.
Yeah.
I concur.
So I'm thinking the week of the 27th.
I'll be out of town that week.
So I.
Well, I do the-
That's on this one. So I prefer not to do it at 10:30. I know you want to get it done now. Maybe if you just
I'll
send
send
out.
an email tomorrow, I'll just.
You know, so you got vacations now for the 27th, so there's 2 out for that week. So that knocks that out.
And I'm on vacation the following week.
There you go. So off we go.
All right, well, I'll work with them and see if they have some suggested dates. Is there
First
any?
week of August?
We won't be here on the first week.
Oh, you'll be gone?
And then we
Tom,
got-
can you get us some any kind of concepts he has that we can look at beforehand?
No, he wants to have a meeting before to design a concept.
Well, I mean, a concept on an 8x11 sheet of paper of what he's looking to do with the property isn't that hard to draw up, you know?
They sent me a site plan, yeah.
We don't all have to be here for the discussion, do we?
No, not
Not
absolutely.
necessarily, but I think they want to. They want to get everybody's opinion.
Especially the plan commission and council.
How big is that site?
It is 40 acres.
So 40 acres of new tax revenue, that's a nice thing. So
Why don't you have them try to meet with the council first?
Well, if you recall, originally we were going to try to do a joint thing.
Right,
And I think that's a good idea because they're also probably going to be seeking.
but the bottom line is you can invite the plan commission, but if they're busy, they're busy.
Yeah.
That's all.
I hope we don't give him any TIF money on vacant land.
Right. Well, you're not
Hey, are you elected?
No, I'm just a voter.
Right. So, I mean, that's not a bad idea. So we serve as on the planning commission at the will of the council. So if we can make it to their meeting, or if they invite us, that would be nice.
Right.
Because they don't invite us to anything.
Right.
So we can do it.
Drag out these meetings till 10.
Your meetings last too long, they said, Baker.
You could call it a joint meeting and then.
Blake can approve everything.
Sounds good.
Mr. Vanderwood, on your agenda, you have the next meeting for August 10th. I'm assuming that's supposed to be August 11th on a Tuesday, not a Monday.
Yeah, that's correct. That's a misprint.
All right, so what was your other motion, Mr. Speck?
To adjourn, please.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
And a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you
Aye.
for helping make Munster a better place to live, folks. Be
All
safe.
right, good night, everybody.
Good night.
Bill, I need you to sign some things before you leave.
You good. I want to hang out as long as I possibly can.
Yeah, me too.
Bowling night is out.
Out.
Definitely. I don't think anything's still open.
Danny Z's.
We got social distance in the parking lot. I brought my Yeti cooler.
There you go. That might work.